3 years ago. Nora had no idea she was about to work for the most impossible man in New York. Benjamin Hayes. Route 9 was empty at 11 at night. Truly empty. Truly dark. The kind of darkness that makes the stars feel too close and the silence feel alive. The Harrison family drove down the road with the quiet determination of people who had left at 6 in the morning and were almost there. Almost. "I need to use the bathroom," Nora said from the back seat. Squeezed between boxes of books and Lord Whisker's carrier, who had been vocally and continuously processing his feelings about the move since Millbrook. "You went in Poughkeepsie," her father, Bob Harrison, said without taking his eyes off the road. "Poughkeepsie was 40 minutes ago, Dad." 42. "Bob, pull over," her mother said. "Linda, we're 40 minutes away. Pull over or pull over, you choose." Bob Harrison sighed. He put on the turn signal. He had fought this particular battle many times and knew exactly how it ended. Linda Harrison turned in the passenger seat with the energy of someone who had chosen to drink coffee at 10 at night and saw absolutely zero problem with that. "Are you okay, honey? Do you need water? I have cookies here, let me see." She was already digging through her purse. "I have one chocolate and one vanilla. Which one do you want? Or both?" "You can have both, sweetheart." "Is Lord Whiskers okay?" He stopped meowing. "Is that good or bad?" "Bob, when a cat stops meowing, is it good or bad?" "I'm asking. It's neutral." "Neutral how?" "Good neutral or concerning neutral? Just neutral." Lord Whiskers chose that moment to meow loud enough to make Nora jump. "Neutral," Bob repeated. Nora was smiling. That involuntary smile that happened when her mother went into full torrential mode and there was nothing to do but let it pass like a summer rain, loud, inevitable, and strangely comforting. They stopped at a gas station that seemed to run more on stubbornness than on demand. Linda made friends with the attendant in less than 3 minutes. His name was Derek. He had 2 kids, his wife did crafts, and left with a bag of candy as a gift because that was the kind of person she was. Back on the road, Linda opened a piece of candy and picked up Derek's story exactly where she had left off, as if the universe had hit pause and she was just pressing play. Nora leaned her head against the window. Manhattan was already appearing on the horizon like a private constellation. All those lights together, orange and white and yellow, unlike anything Millbrook had to offer. She was thinking about that, about those lights, about everything that was about to begin and could not be undone, when her father braked. Not suddenly. It was that gradual braking of an experienced driver who had seen something with enough time not to panic. Linda stopped mid-sentence. "Dear." And there it was, in the middle of the lane, still as a statue. Its eyes reflecting the headlights with that strange golden light animal eyes make in the dark. A large deer, standing in the exact center of Route 9, apparently with no particular urgency to be anywhere else. Bob slowed down. He turned on the high beams. He flashed them twice, 3 times. The deer looked at them. They looked at the deer. The deer, with the particular dignity of animals that do not recognize the concept of human urgency, turned and disappeared into the darkness of the shoulder. Bob let out a breath. "My heart." Linda placed her hand on her chest. After continuing down the road, a car came from the other direction passing them at high speed. "Bob, you flashed your lights. Do you think they saw?" "The deer is on the shoulder of the curve." "I flashed. I warned what I could warn. But we can't see that point of the curve anymore. It's behind us. And what if, Linda?" "I'm saying it because I care. The rest is not in our hands," he said. Silence inside the car. Linda folded her hands in her lap. She closed her eyes for 3 seconds. She murmured something softly. Not the formal church kind of prayer, but that small domestic prayer she said when the world needed a nudge and she was the closest person to ask. Nora looked through the rear window. The curve was behind them. There was nothing to see. Just the dark road bending and disappearing into the darkness. Everything seemed fine. She kept looking anyway. Until Manhattan grew on the horizon and took up all the available space, and there was nothing left to see but the future arriving too fast. Nobody in that car would ever know what happened at that curve. And that is exactly the part you will keep to yourself. It was almost midnight when the car stopped at the curb in front of the tiny East Harlem apartment Nora had rented, for a price that made her father frown every time the subject came up. Bob unloaded the boxes in silence, stacking them with the precision of a man who had spent his life solving practical problems without needing to comment on them. Linda went upstairs, came back down, went back up, and with each trip found something new to rearrange, comment on, or worry about. The three of them stood in the small apartment, surrounded by boxes and Lord Whiskers, who had come out of his carrier and was inspecting the territory with the seriousness of a health inspector who suspects violations. "So," Linda said, looking around with that mother's look that transforms any space into a home through sheer force of will. "This is it. This is it. It's tiny. It's Manhattan, Mom. Tiny, but it has personality." Linda was already organizing the kitchen shelf. "Bob, did you see the shelf is crooked? Did you bring the level?" "I brought it." "Then fix it before we go, because I can't sleep knowing my daughter's shelf is crooked in Manhattan." Bob went to get the level from the toolbox he carried in the car the way a surgeon carries a scalpel, because Bob Harrison never arrived anywhere without being prepared to fix whatever needed fixing. Half an hour later, shelf leveled, boxes stacked against the wall, Lord Whiskers settled in the only sunny corner the apartment offered. The next morning, after resting from the trip, the time came. Linda hugged Nora long enough to make the hug count for real. "Call every day," she said in Nora's ear. "I will. Every day, Nora. Not every week. Every day, Mom. And eat. You forget to eat when you get nervous. I know. And talk to people. Real people, not just the cat. I talk to people. You also talk to the elevator, but that's another conversation." Nora laughed, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. Bob waited his turn. When Linda finally let go, he hugged Nora with the precise brevity of someone who puts all their feeling into 3 seconds because more than that would be a waste of emotion. "It's going to work out," he said. "Simple as breathing." "How do you know?" "Because you're your mother's daughter." Pause. "Which means you'll make enough noise until the whole world pays attention." Nora stood at the window, watching her parents' car disappear down the street. Lord Whiskers jumped onto the windowsill beside her. "Okay," she said to him. "It's just Manhattan. A big city. Full of people. Nothing we can't handle." The cat looked at her with the expression of someone who strongly disagreed but had decided not to argue for now. 3 years after arriving in the city, the turnstile at the 47th Street station still had something personal against Nora Harrison. Of the 5 turnstiles available, in all 342 days she had passed through there. Yes, she counted. She was that kind of person. That specific turnstile, the second from the left, with the half-peeled sticker of a dog wearing a hat, chose exactly Nora's mornings to jam, choke, or simply question its own existence. "Okay," Nora said to the turnstile, swiping her card for the 4th time. "I understand you're having an existential crisis. I have them too. Every day. Usually before coffee. But now is not the time." The turnstile opened. "Thank you. That was hard, but you made it. I'm proud of you." The man behind her in line looked away with the expression of someone who would have preferred not to witness that. Nora didn't notice. She was already going up the escalator with her backpack on her shoulder and the day's mental list organizing itself. Check the machine before it exploded for the 3rd time that month. Don't spill milk on the new shirt. Don't talk to herself in front of customers. "It's not talking to myself," she murmured as she stepped out onto the street. "It's processing out loud. It's completely different. Someone should study that." The sun was still waking up. Manhattan made its usual noise. She walked past Mr. Kim's newsstand. "Good morning, Mr. Kim." "Good morning, Nora. Late as always." "Early for tomorrow." 2 blocks later was the building. 38 floors of glass and steel that seemed designed to make people feel small. Hayes International, one of the largest technology corporations in the country. Nora worked on the ground floor, in the cafeteria, the only floor where you could show up with milk on your shirt and be met with understanding. "Good morning, Roberto." "Good morning, Nora." The security guard raised his hand without taking his eyes off the tablet. "The machine's been acting strange today." She stopped. "Strange how?" "It made a noise yesterday, like a cat with hiccups." "Oh, no." "Oh, yes." The machine was Italian, imported, with more settings than an airplane cockpit and a history of behavior that Nora classified as unstable but talented. "Good morning," she said to the machine, putting on her apron. "Roberto said you weren't feeling well yesterday. Do you want to talk?" The machine stayed silent. "That's okay. But know that I'm here and I'll be keeping an eye on you, Nora." Camila walked by with a tray. "Are you threatening the coffee machine again?" "I'm having a difficult but necessary conversation. I was saying it needed therapy." Camila looked at Nora, looked at the machine, and walked away. The morning rush continued. Coffees, lattes, cappuccinos, the usual ritual. The same people, the same orders, the same small liturgy that Nora had learned to appreciate because predictability in Manhattan was a luxury item. At 9:40, she finally had time for her own coffee. She held the cup with both hands. She looked through the glass at the movement outside. Executives, briefcases, the woman in the gray suit who walked as if the ground were private property. It was an ordinary Tuesday. She didn't know that up above, on the 35th floor, a woman was crying in the marble hallway. She didn't know that a man with ice-blue eyes was looking at his watch with the expression of someone who had already made the decision before opening his mouth. She didn't know that in 45 minutes, a woman with a pearl necklace would walk through that door and see a barista talking to herself with a coffee machine. And that nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same after that. But for now, Nora Harrison was drinking her coffee, and it was the most ordinary day in the world. Help our video reach further. Leave your comment, and if you are enjoying the story, your like means a lot to us. We continue. On the 35th floor of Hayes International, Benjamin Hayes' voice had the kind of precision that did not need volume to cut. "You're fired." It was the third time that week. The third assistant was named Peterson. She had a Harvard degree, 5 years of executive management experience, and had arrived Monday morning with the confidence of someone who was absolutely prepared for anything. She was not prepared for Benjamin Hayes. Nobody was. "You're fired," he said, his voice carrying the emotional temperature of a bank server at 3 in the morning. The wheelchair was perfectly positioned behind the mahogany desk. Benjamin didn't need to be standing to command a room. His ice-blue eyes did all the work. The kind of gaze that made people check whether they had done something wrong, even when they hadn't. "But Mr. Hayes," Peterson's voice had that specific quality of someone trying not to fall apart publicly and losing the battle. "I only asked for 5 minutes to use the restroom, and it took 7. He checked his Rolex without drama. "Efficiency is not a suggestion at this company. Human resources will process your departure. Have a good day." The door closed. The crying began. And on the other side of the glass, as always happened, the faces appeared. The 35th floor of Hayes International had developed, over the past 3 days, an unofficial alert system that worked better than any corporate app. It was simple. When the door to Benjamin's office closed with that specific click, not the regular click, the click, everyone knew. Priya, from marketing, was the first to stand up from her chair. She had a perfect angle from her station to see the hallway without looking like she was watching. She had practiced. Josh, from finance, adjusted his glasses and pretended to reorganize papers that were already organized. Josh reorganized papers when he was nervous, excited, bored, or hungry. Josh's papers were the most organized on the floor. Marcus, the intern, simply stopped pretending he was working. Marcus had arrived 2 weeks ago and had already understood that certain things on the 35th floor were more important than spreadsheets. 3 in 3 days, Josh murmured, adjusting his glasses for the second time in 10 seconds. That's a record even for him. Number 1 lasted 4 hours on Monday, Priya whispered. He fired her because she said good morning with excessive enthusiasm. Excessive enthusiasm? Marcus blinked. She smiled with both sides of her mouth at the same time. Apparently that was too much. Number 2 lasted until Tuesday lunch, Priya continued, in the tone of someone narrating a documentary about natural phenomena. She brought sushi. He doesn't eat sushi. Nobody warned her? Nobody got there in time. Marcus looked at the closed door with the expression of someone recalibrating their understanding of the world. Nobody survives a week with Mr. Hayes, Priya declared, shaking her head with the wisdom of someone who had seen this movie twice. Nobody ever has. Peterson's crying continued, echoing through the hallway like the soundtrack to a day that had started so well. On the other side of the glass, Benjamin had already forgotten that Peterson existed. He turned the wheelchair toward the panoramic window and stayed there, still, looking at Manhattan spreading out to the horizon like a chessboard he knew by heart. Every building, every avenue, every block. He had built much of it. Not literally, that was what construction companies were for, but Hayes International had its fingers in more projects in this city than most people suspected. Technology, infrastructure, systems that made the city run without anyone knowing they were his. It should have felt satisfying. That was what everyone said. You've built an empire, Benjamin. You have everything, Benjamin. What more could you want, Benjamin? He looked at Manhattan and felt nothing. That had started after the accident. No, he didn't call it an accident. He called it an inconvenient setback, which was technically a lie, but was the version he could swallow in the morning without the coffee turning bitter. And since then it had settled in like a permanent tenant in his chest. The absence of feeling. The city was there. The business ran. The meetings happened. The assistants arrived, made mistakes, cried, left. And he remained at the window, looking at the board he controlled, unable to remember why any of it had ever mattered. The door opened without a knock. Only one person in the world had that permission. Benjamin Alexander Hayes. The voice was firm, aristocratic, and carried generations of authority that needed no announcement because it was present in every syllable. Margaret Hayes entered as she always entered, as if the space had been built specifically for her, which, in this case, was technically true because she had chosen every detail of the floor's renovation in 2019, and Benjamin had learned that some battles were not worth the effort. Silver hair pinned in an elegant bun, pearl necklace, gray suit, mother. Spare me, Benjamin. She stopped in front of the desk, arms crossed with the precision of someone who had practiced the gesture for 50 years. 3 assistants, Benjamin. 3. In 3 days. They were incompetent. They were human beings, with functioning bladders, and one who had the innocent habit of bringing sushi for lunch. She let out the kind of sigh that carried decades of dealing with stubborn men. You are impossible. I'm efficient. You're alone. She leaned slightly over the desk, which, in this context, is worse. The silence that followed had texture. Benjamin gripped the armrests of his chair but kept his expression at the neutral setting he had spent years perfecting. I have a company to run. You have a life to live. A fundamental difference that has apparently escaped your attention. Margaret picked up her purse from the chair where she had set it without being invited, because Margaret Hayes did not wait for invitations. We're going to get coffee. Now. I have a board meeting in 20 minutes, which I rescheduled for an hour from now. She smiled, and there was something in the smile that Benjamin recognized as danger wrapped in elegance. Benjamin closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Mother, don't argue. You need fresh air, and I need a cappuccino. She was already heading toward the door. Let's go. I don't extend invitations twice. You've known that since you were 7. Arguing with Margaret Hayes was as productive as arguing with gravity. Benjamin unlocked his wheelchair and followed her. In the hallway, the 3 of them quickly returned to their positions when they heard the movement. Priya in her chair, Josh with his papers, Marcus at his spreadsheet. Benjamin walked past without looking at any of them, which was normal. But Margaret stopped, looked at all 3 with a maternal X-ray that forgave nothing, and said, "Get back to work. The show is over for now." For now. When the elevator closed, Marcus slowly turned to Priya. She said, "For now." I heard. Does that mean there will be more show? Priya looked at the elevator, then at the cafeteria downstairs visible through the glass, then back at Marcus. There always is. In the elevator going down to the ground floor, Benjamin looked at his own reflection in the mirrored walls. Impeccable suit, correct posture, controlled expression, everything in place, everything a suit of armor. The doors opened on the ground floor, and that was when he heard it for the first time, coming from behind the cafeteria counter, clear enough to cut through the buzz of the rush hour, a voice speaking with absolute conviction to an Italian coffee machine. Okay, press the button. The right button. That one there. No, not that one. The other one. The other one. Nora. Benjamin stopped. Margaret beside him turned her face. And for the first time in a long time, there was something different in her eyes. Not worry. not frustration, hope. The ground floor cafeteria was one of those spaces architects call welcoming and accountants call too expensive for what it does. Margaret walked in as if it were her property, which technically it was. Benjamin followed her in silence, his eyes already searching for the source of that voice. He didn't have to look far. And behind the counter, as the epicenter of a slowly forming disaster, there she was. Brown hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started the day neat and clearly made its own decisions since then. Uniform with a milk stain on the sleeve that suggested this was not the first battle of the day. And her eyes fixed on the Italian coffee machine. "Okay," she said to the machine, in a voice that carried the resignation of someone having a difficult conversation for the fourth time. "I know you're not doing well today. Roberto warned me. But we need to make this work, because there's a line, and the line is looking at me, and I don't like when the line looks at me like that." The machine did not respond, ungrateful. Benjamin frowned. She was actually talking to the machine, out loud, with structured arguments. "The steam nozzle," she continued, pointing to the left side of the machine with her index finger like a teacher correcting a repeat offender, "goes here. Not on the side. Not on top. Here. We talked about this last week and you promised to do better." Margaret leaned slightly toward Benjamin and murmured, "She's wonderful." "She's arguing with an appliance." "Exactly." Nora pressed the button. The machine made a sound that was definitely not in the manufacturer's manual. A combination of mechanical hissing and something that could only be described as industrial protest. And a jet of steam escaped from the side with its own force and direction. The milk went the wrong way. Completely wrong. Nora stood still for 2 seconds, looking at the shirt now with 2 stains where there had been one, with the expression of someone processing a cosmic injustice. "Ah, fantastic," she said, with the specific calm of someone who had moved past the panic phase and arrived at the philosophical acceptance phase. "Now I look like I got into a fight with a dairy cow. And lost." 3 people in line looked away at the same time. One of them was clearly holding a phone at a suspicious angle. Nora noticed neither of these facts because she was looking at the machine with the expression of a judge about to deliver a verdict. "That was on purpose," she said, pointing again. "You did that on purpose, I know you did." "Who are you talking to?" said Camilla, walking by with a tray without slowing down. "To the machine." "Again?" "She provoked me." "It's an appliance, Nora." "With attitude, Camilla. There's a big difference." Camilla walked away shaking her head, and Nora went back to battle, this time with renewed determination. She took a deep breath, repositioned her hands, mentally ran through each step of the process like a pilot doing a pre-flight checklist. And with the concentration of a neurosurgeon in a delicate procedure, she prepared the cappuccino. The result came out perfect. Dense foam, right temperature, the exact ratio of coffee to milk that turned a common drink into something that justified waking up early. Nora placed the cup on the tray with the care of someone transporting an archaeological artifact. "Okay," she said to the cup, in a lower voice now, almost intimate. "You look good. You look presentable. I don't, but you make up for it. Go on. Represent us well." That was when she looked up and saw Margaret Hayes at the front of the counter. What happened in the next 3 seconds was technically invisible to any casual observer, but Benjamin, who had spent years reading entire rooms in fractions of a second, saw every millimeter. Nora's eyes went to Margaret, then to the pearl necklace, then to the suit, then back to Margaret with the expression of someone running a quick calculation and arriving at an alarming result. Then they went to Benjamin, to the wheelchair, to the $3,000 suit, back to Margaret, and then the expression changed completely, not to panic because panic would have been simpler, but to that specific expression of someone who realizes they are in the middle of a situation that was not properly communicated and is processing the implications in real time. "Oh," she said. "Oh," longer pause. "You are," she started, stopped, started again. "You are Mr. Hayes, the CEO of the entire building, who technically pays me, indirectly, through several levels of corporate hierarchy, but still." She took a deep breath. "Okay, Nora, stop talking. Make the coffee. Don't do anything else. Just the coffee." Benjamin arched an eyebrow. She had said all of that out loud, including the part about stopping talking. 2 cappuccinos, Nora announced, turning back to the machine with the speed of someone executing a strategic retreat. 2. Simple. No drama. You can do it, Nora. This time without the flying milk, please. The machine cooperated. This time the process was reasonably dignified. Reasonably because Nora dropped a spoon along the way, which fell to the floor with a crash disproportionate to its size, bounced twice, and stopped exactly in the middle of the passage where Camila was trying to walk through with a full tray. Camila stopped, looked at the spoon, looked at Nora, went around it. "Sorry," Nora said to the spoon, then realized what she had done. To Camila. "I meant to say to Camila." 2 minutes later, 2 perfect cappuccinos were on the tray. Foam drawn into small hearts that Nora made out of habit, and that in that specific moment seemed like a very revealing choice. She placed the cups on the counter with excessive care. "Here you go. 2 cappuccinos. No victims." She looked at her own shirt. Just existing collateral damage. "But the coffee is perfect. I promise the coffee is perfect." Margaret picked up both cups, handed one to Benjamin, and then did something Nora clearly did not expect. She put the cup back on the counter. She opened her purse, the kind of purse that, you already know, very Margaret Hayes, and took out a business card. She slid it across the counter with the precision of someone who had made that gesture before and knew exactly the effect it produced. Nora looked at the card. Margaret E. Hayes, Hayes International, founder, executive office, 12th floor. Human resources, 12th floor, Margaret said in the tone of someone who is not suggesting but informing. "Tell them I sent you, Monday, 9 in the morning. Do not be late." And then she simply picked up her cup again and walked toward the tables as if she had just mentioned the weather. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. "Wait," Nora said, looking at the card, at Margaret, at Benjamin, back at the card. "Your mother just offered me a job? Here? In this building? In the same building where," she lowered her voice, which didn't help much, "you fired 3 people in 3 days?" Benjamin looked at her with the expression of a man having a completely new experience and who had not yet decided what to think about it. "Welcome to my personal nightmare, Miss Harrison," she completed automatically. "Nora Harrison. Miss Harrison." He headed toward the table where Margaret was already seated, pushing the wheelchair with the posture of someone who had ended the conversation. But halfway there, without stopping, without turning around, he said, "The cappuccino is good." Nora stood behind the counter holding the business card. She looked at the machine. "Did you see that?" she whispered. The machine did not respond. "I don't know what to do with that either." Outside, at a light wood table under minimalist pendant lighting, Margaret Hayes drank her cappuccino with the calm smile of someone whose plan was exactly on schedule. Benjamin looked at the street, but his eyes went back to the counter once. Just once. Quick enough that nobody would notice. Except Margaret, who noticed everything, and who murmured to her cup, too low for Benjamin to hear. "Perfect." Nora stared at the card long enough for Camila to walk past her 3 times with different trays. On the 4th pass, Camila stopped. "How long are you going to stand there like that?" "Until I understand what just happened." "What happened?" "The CEO's mother offered me a job." Camila looked at the card, looked at Nora, looked at the table where Margaret was drinking her cappuccino with the serenity of someone who had not just changed anyone's life. "Go," she said and walked away. Nora looked at the card again. Margaret E. Hayes, founder, Human Resources, 12th floor, Monday, 9 o'clock. It was Friday. She had the entire weekend to make a completely rational and sensible decision about whether or not she should show up on the 12th floor of a building where the CEO fired people for liking sushi. She showed up on Monday at 8:58 with the new shirt. No stains, ironed, chosen with the care of someone who knew that the first impression was everything, and the second impression was what remained when the first one fell apart. The problem started in the elevator. There were 2 elevators in the lobby. One for visitors and service staff, ground floor up to the 15th floor. The other, with a more sophisticated control panel and actual carpet on the floor, for the executive floors. Nora walked into the second one thinking it was the first. In her defense, the doors were almost identical. In her disadvantage, the panel had gold buttons that should have been enough of a sign. 12th floor. She said to herself, pressing the button. Simple, straightforward, professional. The elevator went up and kept going up. It passed the 12th floor without stopping, because Nora had pressed the wrong button with the full confidence of someone pressing the right one. And the wrong button in question was the 35th, which was exactly where the 12 should have been if the panel were the one from the other elevator. The doors opened. 35th floor. Nora looked at the marble, glass, and steel hallway stretching ahead of her, with the energy of a place that was not designed to receive people in new shirts without an appointment. "This," she said to the elevator, "is not the 12th floor." The elevator did not respond. It simply closed its doors with the satisfied click of a mission accomplished. Nora stood still in the hallway. People in suits walked past with the determination of those who had important places to be. Nobody looked at her. Nobody asked anything. "Okay," she murmured, slowly turning to look for the button to call the elevator back. "You got on the wrong elevator. No drama. Press the button, go down, find the right elevator, get to the 12th, and nobody needs to know that." "Miss Harrison?" Nora stopped. The woman in front of her had a navy blue suit, a clipboard, and the specific smile of someone who was trained to appear welcoming in situations that were not necessarily welcoming. Yes?" Nora raised her hand like a student answering roll call. "But I think there's a mistake. I came for the 12th floor, Human Resources," Mrs. Hayes said. "Perfect." The woman was already turning on her heels with military precision. "Follow me, please." Wait. But she was already marching down the hallway, and Nora, because apparently she had lost complete control over her own life, followed. The desk was made of glass, large, transparent, and positioned with surgical intention in front of a door with a brushed metal plate. "Benjamin Hayes, CEO." Nora looked at the desk, looked at the plate, back at the desk. "Jennifer." The woman introduced herself, extending her hand with her badge swinging. "Human Resources. Mrs. Hayes processed your hiring this morning." She placed a thick folder, an iPad, and a badge on the desk with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times. "Employee manual, system password, access to Mr. Hayes' calendar, and your management device." Nora looked at the badge. "Nora Harrison, Executive Assistant, CEO. This has to be a mistake." "No mistakes." Jennifer checked her watch. "Mr. Hayes prefers black coffee, no sugar, in a white ceramic mug, temperature between 82 and 85 degrees Celsius." "You're telling me the exact temperature of the coffee?" Hayes International does not joke about coffee temperature. She was already heading out. "Good luck." And she left. Just like that. Nora stood there with the badge in one hand, the iPad in the other, the folder under her arm, and her dignity somewhere between the lobby and the 35th floor, where it had been left behind. "Okay," she said to the glass desk. "You and I are going to have to figure each other out. I don't know anything about being an executive assistant. I don't know anything about corporate calendars, and I definitely don't know how to measure coffee temperature with laboratory precision. But I'm here, and I'm going to pretend I know what I'm doing until I actually do." Pause. "That's a solid plan, right?" The desk did not respond. Better than nothing. She sat down in the leather chair, one of those comfortable ones that wraps around you, opened the iPad, and stared at the screen full of color-coded appointments that looked like corporate hieroglyphics. That was when the door opened. Benjamin Hayes appeared in the wheelchair, wearing a charcoal gray suit and the expression of someone who had already made hard decisions before breakfast and was prepared to make more. He saw Nora, stopped, 3 seconds of absolute silence. Nora held up the badge like identification. She said nothing, just showed the badge. Benjamin looked at the badge, at her, at the folder, at the iPad, back at her. And then he did something she did not expect. He did not call security. He did not pick up the phone. He did not say absolutely anything. He simply turned the wheelchair back toward the office. "Come in." The office was exactly what she imagined a CEO's office would be, if the person who decorated it had been given the instruction, intimidating but elegant, and executed it with absolute perfection. An entire wall of glass. Manhattan below like a living map. Awards aligned with a ruler. 0 personal photos. 0 plants. 0 anything that suggested a human being spent time there by choice. Benjamin was behind the desk, fingers interlaced, looking at her with the expression of an entomologist studying a new species. "So," he said, "you are my new assistant." Technically, apparently, surprisingly. Nora stopped, took a breath. "Yes. But look, I think there's a huge misunderstanding here because I work in the cafeteria and I know how to make an excellent cappuccino, but I don't know anything about," she gestured vaguely at the entire office, "whatever it is executives do. My mother hired you. Your mother is," she stopped before the edge, "is what? Incredible. Powerful. A force of nature. Completely terrifying in a way that I deeply respect." Pause. I almost said something else. I noticed. Benjamin picked up the phone. Nora's stomach went to the floor below without using the elevator. "Transfer the call to my mother, please." "Look, Mr. Hayes, before you do that, I just want to say that," the words came out before she could organize them, "my apartment has a leak in the bathroom, my cat needs his shots, and I owe 3 months of streaming that I can't cancel because the website won't let me, so I really need this job, and—" "You have a cat?" She blinked. "I do. Orange. His name is Lord Whiskers. He judges every life decision I make with a consistency that I find admirable." Something very small passed through Benjamin's eyes. Small, fast, almost invisible, but it was there. The phone rang before he could say anything. "Benjamin, darling?" Margaret's voice on speakerphone had the energy of someone who had been waiting for that call. "How is my favorite new hire? Mother, she has no qualifications whatsoever she has interesting flaws. The other 3 didn't, and look how that turned out. She talks to herself. And you talk to spreadsheets at 3 in the morning. We all have our quirks. That's completely different. It's exactly the same, only the listener changes." A strategic pause. "Keep her, Benjamin? Or I'll transfer her to my office." The line fell silent. Benjamin looked at Nora with the expression of a man fighting an internal battle he already knows the outcome of, but is still processing the defeat. "Fine," he said finally, hanging up. "You stay." "I stay?" "Under one condition." He leaned slightly forward. "I'm going to make this the most difficult week of your life. You will want to leave. And when that happens, and it will happen, you will admit that my mother was wrong." Nora looked at him, at the blue eyes that had no warmth, at the office with no photos, no plants, no sign of life other than spreadsheets and awards. And something inside her, that specific part that made her talk to turnstiles and elevators and coffee machines, decided on its own. "I accept," Benjamin blinked. "What?" "I accept the challenge." She placed the iPad on the desk with more confidence than she felt. 1 week. Let's see who gives up first. You of putting up with me, or me of surviving you. The silence that followed had texture. "Your first task," he said, pointing to the door, "is to organize my calendar for the next 3 days. No conflicts, no mistakes." Nora nodded, stood up, turned toward the door with complete confidence, and almost walked straight into the glass. She stopped 1 inch before it. "I knew it was there," she said, without turning around. "Reflexes test. We passed." She walked out with what was left of her dignity. Outside, she sat in a leather chair, opened the iPad, and stared at the color-coded calendar. "Okay, Lord Whiskers," she murmured. "If I don't come back, you inherit the mug collection." Inside the office, Benjamin looked at the closed door. That was when Stella Ward appeared in the hallway. Perfect blonde hair, impeccable white suit, the kind of presence that occupies space before physically arriving in it. She stopped when she saw Nora at the desk. She looked at the desk, at the badge, at Benjamin's office behind the glass, and then she looked at Nora with the calm, calculated expression of someone who had just identified a problem and was already thinking of the solution. Nora looked up from the iPad. The two of them stared at each other for 2 seconds. Stella smiled. It was not a kind smile, and she moved on without saying a word. Nora looked back at the iPad. "Okay," she murmured. "That one is going to be trouble." She didn't know yet how much. 2 days passed. Nora survived both through a combination of stubbornness, coffee in a clinically questionable quantity, and the fact that the color-coded calendar had finally made sense on Tuesday night when she realized the colors didn't represent priority. They represented department. A discovery that would have been more useful Monday morning, but still. "Okay," she said to the iPad early Wednesday morning, while the 35th floor was still waking up around her. "Board meeting at 9. 12 executives. Conference room A. You're going to walk in, sit in the corner, take notes, and not say absolutely anything unless asked. The iPad did not respond. That was for me, not for you. Conference Room A had been designed for one specific thing: to remind everyone present exactly where they stood in the hierarchy of the known universe. Polished mahogany table that reflected the recessed ceiling lights like the surface of still water, leather chairs, and an entire wall of glass showing Manhattan below, not as a view but as an argument. Look at what we built. Now sit down and pay attention. Nora walked in with the tablet, chose the most inconspicuous chair in the corner, and sat with the posture of someone determined to be invisible for as long as necessary. She lasted 4 minutes. Because in the fifth minute, while adjusting the tablet to the right angle for note-taking, her elbow went the wrong way. The tablet flew off the table. It hit the carpeted floor with a crash that echoed through the room, as if the carpet had decided not to absorb anything on that particular day. 12 pairs of eyes turned simultaneously. Nora sat still with her elbow still in the air, in the exact spot where the tablet had been half a second before. "Sorry," she said, leaning down to pick it up. "It was slippery." "Traitor." She stood back up with the tablet, checked the screen. "Are you okay?" "Blink once for yes." The man with thick-framed glasses in the third chair to the left made the specific movement of someone converting a laugh into a cough with considerable effort. Benjamin, who had entered the room while all this happened and positioned himself at the head of the table without anyone noticing, because Benjamin Hayes had the gift of occupying space without announcing it, cleared his throat. "Miss Harrison will be sitting in on the meeting today." His voice had no judgment, no humor, nothing whatsoever beyond information. "Please proceed with the reports." The reports began. Numbers, charts, projections, acronyms that Nora wrote out phonetically when she didn't understand the actual meaning, which, in the first 3 presentations, was frequent enough to be concerning. She was doing reasonably well, reasonably. Quarter 4 showed 23% growth in the business-to-business segment, said the bald man from finance, pointing to the chart with the laser pointer. Nora looked at the number, looked at the chart, asked the question internally, and then asked the question externally. "Is that good?" she whispered. 23 sounds good. Solid number, confident. The bald man paused, looked at her. She straightened the tablet, confirming mentally. "Continue." Benjamin pressed 2 fingers to his temple with the delicacy of someone avoiding a migraine through sheer willpower. The meeting continued. And then they got to the design report. The screen projected images of the new product. Clean lines, premium finish, the aesthetic of something that wanted to look expensive without looking like it was trying. Benjamin leaned forward, analyzing with the intensity of someone about to make a decision with 8 zeros. And Nora, whose internal filter had clearly entered power-saving mode after 2 days of sustained effort, murmured, "It looks like a millionaire penguin in an expensive suit." The silence was instant, not the silence of a natural pause between one sentence and the next, the silence of an entire room processing what it had just heard. 12 heads turned. Benjamin froze, his fingers still over the tablet, his eyes going to Nora with an expression she couldn't immediately classify. She started, said that out loud. Nobody answered, but 11 expressions confirmed that yes, she had absolutely said that out loud. Not that penguins are bad. The words came out in a sequence too fast to contain. Penguins are elegant, sophisticated. They walk with purpose, and the product's suit is beautiful. Very well executed. Probably cost a fortune in design research. And Miss Harrison, Benjamin said. She closed her mouth. "Silent notes, please." "Yes, silent. Completely mute." She mimed, locking her lips and throwing away the key. "Starting now." The man with the glasses had his hand over his mouth, his shoulders moving suspiciously. The woman from marketing had discovered a sudden interest in her own badge, and Benjamin, who had the controlled expression of someone who had practiced neutrality as a discipline for years, turned his face 2 degrees to the right. 2 degrees. Just enough that only Nora, at the specific angle where she was seated, could see it, the corner of his mouth. Trembling. He was trying not to laugh, and he was losing. Nora stayed completely still, as if any movement might break that moment. Then, because the universe had its own timing and didn't ask for permission, she added in a very low voice, Penguins mate for life. They're very loyal. The man with the glasses let out a laugh he tried to turn into a cough and couldn't quite manage. Benjamin closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When he opened them, the corner of his mouth was still there. Smaller, more controlled, but it was there. Stella Ward walked in 12 minutes later. She hadn't been invited to that specific meeting. Nora had seen the calendar enough to know that. But Stella Ward clearly had a flexible relationship with invitations. She walked in as if the room had been built to receive her. Perfect blonde hair, black dress that shouted power and money at full volume. And she sat next to Benjamin with the familiarity of someone who had done that many times. "Sorry for the delay," she said, smiling at the room with the smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her hand rested on the arm of Benjamin's chair with calculated lightness. "Benjamin, darling, we need to fit the third quarter campaign into this discussion." Benjamin moved his arm off the chair with a motion so subtle it only existed if you were paying attention. Nora was paying attention. "Stella, this isn't the moment," he said. "There's always room for strategy." Stella finally looked at Nora, and it was the kind of look that takes full inventory in 2 seconds. "And you must be the new assistant." "Nora Harrison," Nora replied. "Where did you work before, Nora?" The room grew a little quieter. "In the cafeteria," Nora said, because lying had never been a skill of hers. "On the ground floor. I made cappuccinos. I was Employee of the Month twice. I have a certificate somewhere." The silence lasted exactly as long as it took everyone to process. Stella arched an eyebrow that had been drawn with an architect's precision. "Fascinating. Benjamin has always had eclectic taste in recruiting." "It was my mother's choice," Benjamin said, and there was something in his tone that ended the subject before it started. Stella opened the folder she had brought, turned to Benjamin, and the rest of the meeting happened around the two of them as if the room had reorganized its gravity. Nora took notes, in silence. As promised. When the meeting ended and the executives filed out, some with sympathetic glances in Nora's direction, others clearly holding back comments, Stella was the last to stand. She stopped at the door. She turned to Nora with the smile that was not kind, the same one from the hallway 2 days before, and said, "Nora, how nice to have you on the team." A half-second pause. "Let's see for how long." And she left, her heels echoing on the marble until they faded into the distance. Nora stared at the empty doorway. "Okay," she murmured to the tablet, "she's definitely going to be trouble." On the other side of the table, Benjamin began gathering his papers. "Miss Harrison, I know. Penguin. Sorry. It won't happen again. You compared me to a penguin, an elegant penguin, in an expensive suit with exemplary loyalty." He stopped gathering his papers, and Nora saw it again, clearer this time, longer, undeniable, the corner of his mouth. "Go organize the schedule for tomorrow," he said, going back to his papers. "Yes, of course. Going." She stood up, grabbed the tablet, walked toward the door with the recovered dignity of someone who had survived their own meeting. At the door, she stopped. "Mr. Hayes?" He looked up. "Penguins really are amazing." It wasn't a criticism, it was admiration. She left before he could respond. But not before hearing, low and almost imperceptible, the sound that had been trying to escape since the millionaire penguin part. A laugh. Small, real. The first one. Elevator 3 had a reputation. Not the good reputation of a reliable elevator that arrives on time and doesn't make existential noises. The other one, the reputation of an elevator that got stuck between floors frequently enough to be a statistic, but not frequently enough to justify replacement, which, in Nora's opinion, was exactly the kind of corporate decision that explained a lot about the world. She knew this because she had asked Roberto in the first week. Roberto had looked at her with the expression of someone carrying heavy knowledge and said only, "Avoid the 3 when you can." Nora had not avoided it. It was Thursday afternoon when she left her desk with a folder of documents that needed to reach the 23rd floor before 4. The kind of simple task that shouldn't have complications, but which, in Nora Harrison's particular universe, rarely reached its destination without a story to tell. The first 2 elevators were occupied. The third was open. Waiting. With that specific energy of a well-positioned trap. "Okay," she said to the open doors. "I know your reputation. You know mine. Let's make a deal. You take me to the 23rd without drama. And I won't tell anyone you make that strange noise on the 12th floor that sounds like existential judgment. The elevator did not respond. She stepped in, and only then saw Benjamin in the corner, hands on the wheels of the wheelchair, looking at her with the expression of a man who had just witnessed diplomatic negotiations with vertical transportation equipment. Nora stopped. She started. Talking to the elevator, he finished, establishing expectations. It's different. It's exactly the same thing. Context matters. Benjamin looked at her for 1 second, 2. Then looked at the panel and said nothing more. Nora pressed the button for the 23rd. Benjamin already had the 18th selected, a meeting with legal that had been rescheduled twice and couldn't handle a third. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend with the treacherous smoothness of equipment that hadn't yet revealed its intentions. The silence between the 35th and 30th floors was reasonably civilized. Nora held the folder with both hands and watched the numbers above the door count down with the concentration of someone pretending to find it fascinating. On the 28th floor, the elevator made the noise. That noise. The metallic screech Roberto had mentioned, which sounded exactly like mechanical judgment in real time. Nora looked at the ceiling. "I knew it," she murmured. "I knew you were going to do this." "Miss Harrison," Benjamin said, "I'm having a justified reaction to a documented provocation. You're arguing with the elevator. It started it. The elevator stopped, not on the 23rd, not on the 18th. Between the 26th and the 25th, with a jolt that made Nora clutch the folder to her chest like a shield, the lights flickered once, and then everything settled into the dim glow of the emergency system. Silence. Nora said to the ceiling, No, we had a deal. I spoke clearly about the deal." Benjamin picked up the internal phone with the calm of someone who had done this before. "This is Hayes. We're stuck in elevator 3. "Maintenance on the way, Mr. Hayes," the voice crackled through the receiver. 5 to 10 minutes, he hung up. Nora looked at the mirrored walls, at the folder, at Benjamin, back at the walls. The mirrors multiplied everything. 2 Benjamins, 2 Noras, 2 folders, 2 embarrassing situations on infinite loop. "Okay," she said to her own reflection, "you've survived worse things. Probably. The list isn't coming to me right now, but it definitely exists." "Do you always talk to everything?" Benjamin asked. "Only when I'm nervous." "Are you nervous right now?" "I'm stuck in an elevator with my boss between the 26th and 25th floor while maintenance is on the way." She made air quotes, which is the corporate version of maybe today, maybe tomorrow. She looked at him. "You're not nervous?" "No." "How?" "Practice." "This has happened before?" "With elevator 3? A very brief pause, twice." Nora looked at the ceiling with the expression of someone reviewing every decision that had led to that moment. "Roberto warned me," she said. "He warned me specifically. And I got in anyway because the other 2 were occupied and I had a folder to deliver before 4, and right now it's 3:42 and the folder still hasn't reached the 23rd, and the folder can wait." "Right?" "It can't. There are documents that need a signature before the close." "Miss Harrison," she stopped. "The folder," he said with the specific patience of someone simplifying an argument for a restless audience, "can wait 10 minutes." Nora looked at the folder, at Benjamin, at the folder again. "Fine," she said. "The folder can wait." The silence that followed was different from the silence at the start, less tense, more honest. Nora leaned against the elevator wall, the folder in her lap, and looked at the numbers frozen on the panel. "Stella talked to you," she said. "It wasn't a question." Benjamin didn't answer right away. "Why do you think that?" "Because since yesterday's meeting you've been canceling anything I would be present for and sending other people to pass messages to me." She shrugged. "You don't have to be subtle. If you want me to leave, just say so. I'm not trying to get you to leave. Then you're doing a terrible job of pretending I exist." He looked at his hands, his fingers on the wheel rim, the posture that didn't change even in an elevator stuck between floors. "Stella made observations about your suitability for the position," he said finally. "And she's not entirely wrong," Nora replied before he needed to. "I don't have experience. I'm chaotic. I talk to myself at a frequency that probably violates some corporate mental health standard." "But," he said, and there was something different in his tone. She looked up. But my mother is rarely wrong about people. He looked at her directly, and there was something there that he clearly didn't show often. And you are different. Different good or different bad? I'm still deciding. The elevator chose that moment to shudder, slightly, just enough to make Nora grab the rim of the wheelchair by reflex. Benjamin looked at her hand on the rim. She let go immediately. Sorry, reflex. I didn't mean to. It's fine. I wasn't going to push without asking. Nora. It was the first time he had used her first name. She closed her mouth. It's fine, he repeated, softer this time. The silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. The kind that happens when two people stop pretending the conversation is about something else. Were you always like this? He asked. Like what? Saying everything you think. Nora considered the question with genuine seriousness. My mother says I was born narrating. She paused. She talks to herself too. It's genetic, probably. In another generation there'll be a scientific study on it. The corner of Benjamin's mouth moved just a little. You make up these stories, he said. Sometimes. She smiled. But it worked, so it was worth it. What worked made you almost smile, again. He looked at her with an expression she was starting to read, that specific mix of contained surprise and something that didn't have a name yet, but was there. Stella said I'm different when you're around, he said. And that's bad. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the frozen numbers on the panel, at the closed doors, at the hands on the wheel rim. I think, he said slowly, as if the words needed to be weighed before coming out, that I didn't mind being different, until someone pointed it out as a problem. The elevator came back to life with a jolt. The regular lights returned. The numbers started counting down again. 26th, 25th. It stopped. The doors opened on the 25th floor, where two maintenance workers were waiting with tools and the expressions of people who do this every week. Sorry for the delay, Mr. Hayes, one of them said. Benjamin nodded and went out first, pushing the wheels with his arms, the chair gliding across the hallway marble with the smoothness of practiced movement. Nora walked out behind him, folder against her chest. In the hallway, before they went in different directions, she toward the elevator to the 23rd, he toward the one to the 18th. Benjamin stopped. Miss Harrison. Yes, keep being you. A pause. No matter what Stella or anyone else says. And then he continued down the hallway toward the next elevator, the wheels rolling on the marble without hurry. Nora stood there with the folder. Okay, Nora, she murmured. He basically said he wants you around. Or you're reading too much into it. Probably reading too much into it. Definitely reading too much into it. But she was smiling when she finally stepped into the right elevator. And she didn't see Stella leaning against the wall of the 25th floor hallway, a few feet away, phone in hand. She had seen everything, heard everything, and was typing. At 8:40 at night, the 35th floor of Hayes International was a different place. Not scary. Not mysterious, just empty in the specific way that places full of people become when everyone goes home. As if the silence were the true version of the space, and the noise of the whole day were just a visitor. Nora knew this because she was there when she shouldn't have been. Okay, she murmured to the dark hallway as she stepped out of the elevator with her badge in hand. Go in, grab the folder, come out. 3 minutes. Nobody needs to know you forgot important documents on top of the desk because you were so relieved to have survived the first days that you left without looking back. The hallway answered only with the low hum of the air conditioning. Non-constructive judgment, she said to the air conditioning. You forget things too. The folder was exactly where she had left it, on top of the glass desk, lit up by the emergency light like evidence of a minor crime. Nora picked it up, tucked it under her arm, and was turning to leave when she saw it. The light. At the end of the hallway, behind a door she had walked past several times without paying attention, there was a sliver of light on the floor. Not the bluish emergency light of the building after hours, yellow light. Warm, from a room lit on purpose. And then came the sound. Heavy breathing, the kind that comes from real effort, not tiredness. A muffled groan that was clearly bottled up anger trying not to become words. And beneath it all, music, instrumental, rhythmic, the kind of soundtrack people put on when they need the brain to believe the body can do it. Nora stopped. Looked at the door. Looked at the exit. Looked at the door again. No, she said to herself in a very low voice. You take the folder and leave. It's none of your business. Don't look. You're not that kind of person. 4 seconds of silence. You are absolutely that kind of person, she admitted and went to the door. The frosted glass window let light through, but not a clear image. Nora moved closer slowly, as if the sound of her own footsteps might give her away before she herself decided what to do with her presence. Through the glass, through the haze of the frost, she saw parallel metal bars, medical equipment organized against the wall, mirrors covering the left side of the room from floor to ceiling, and Benjamin, standing between the bars, not sitting in the chair, standing or trying to, which was completely different, and so much more than that at the same time. His hands gripped the metal with enough force to leave marks. His knuckles were white. Sweat ran down his face and his shirt, which had parted ways with the suit at some point in the night. Open at the collar, sleeves rolled up to the elbow, as if the controlled and impeccable version of Benjamin Hayes had stayed outside with the jacket. Beside him, a man in a blue polo shirt, physical therapist, patient, with the posture of someone who had seen that scene many times and still hadn't given up seeing it again, was saying something too low for Nora to hear. Benjamin shook his head. The man said it again. And Benjamin, with the expression of someone fighting a battle that has no audience and wants none, tried to take a step. His right leg moved. Inches. His arms trembled with the effort of holding the weight the leg couldn't fully take. His breathing came in short, irregular bursts. The kind of breathing the body does when it has reached its limit and the mind refuses to accept the information. And then the leg stopped. Benjamin closed his eyes. His fingers gripped the bars with enough force to make his knuckles go completely white. I can't, he said, and there was something in that voice Nora had never heard. Not anger, not coldness. Real exhaustion, without armor, without audience, without any of the layers he wore throughout the day. One more, the man in the polo said. David, one more. One. Benjamin was silent for 3 seconds that seemed much longer than 3 seconds have any right to be. And tried again. It was exactly in that moment that Nora, who had stayed quiet for longer than was statistically probable for her, murmured without realizing it, the voice escaping before any filter had a chance to intercept. Come on. Right leg. That's it. You've got this. The silence was instant. Benjamin and David turned at the same time. Nora stood frozen with the folder under her arm and her hand raised in an encouraging gesture that had started completely without conscious authorization. She started, wasn't. Pause. The door was. Another pause. Folder. I came to get the folder. She held up the folder as evidence. Which is here, in my hand. Proof of innocence. Benjamin stared at her, his breathing still irregular and his arms still on the bars. What are you doing here? Folder, she repeated. Documents. Forgot them. Came to get them. Completely innocent. A pause. Sorry. The silence lasted as long as it took Benjamin to decide something. Come in. The room was smaller on the inside than it looked through the glass. Or maybe it seemed smaller because every inch was occupied by something with a purpose. Bars, mats, resistance equipment, mirrors that multiplied everything and allowed nothing to go unnoticed. David helped Benjamin back into the wheelchair with the efficiency of someone who had done that hundreds of times, handed him a towel, and left with the discretion of a professional who knows when a room needs fewer people. The silence that remained had weight. Benjamin wiped his face with the towel without looking at her. How much did you see? Enough, she said, and then, before it could sound wrong, she added, enough to know that you're stronger than you let people think. He didn't respond. 3 years, he said finally, his voice lower still. Since the accident. 1 year recovering and 2 in physical therapy. He didn't explain the accident, didn't describe it. He just let the words sit there, unwrapped, without context, as if the weight of them was already enough information. Nora stayed quiet, and for 1 second, just one, something settled in her chest with a weight she couldn't name. As if those words, 3 years, accident, recovery, resonated somewhere she didn't know she had. She didn't know why. There was no way for her to know. Nobody knows you do this? She asked. David knows. Nobody else? It's nobody's business. It's my business now, she said, simple as breathing. Because I saw it, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't. He looked at her with that expression she was learning, somewhere between the discomfort of being truly seen and something that didn't have a name yet. 2 years here, he said, looking at the bars, and I've never moved more than a few inches. Today you moved. Inches, Nora. Today, she repeated firmly. You moved today. That's what matters. David came back with 2 water bottles, handed one to Benjamin, and looked at the 2 of them with studied neutrality. Are we done for today? Benjamin looked at the bars, at the hands that were still slightly trembling, at Nora sitting on the bench with the folder forgotten on the floor. One more set, he said. Mr. Hayes, you've already done twice the protocol. One more, David. David sighed. He began getting Benjamin ready to return to the bars. And that was when it happened. Nora stood up, reached her right hand behind her back, reached her left hand behind her back and drew, with the solemnity of a samurai unsheathing a sword and the energy of a cheerleader who had spent the entire summer training, 2 imaginary pom-poms that only she could see, but which, in that specific moment, were absolutely real. She shook them in the air. Benjamin Hayes, she shouted, and the voice echoed off the mirrors and came back multiplied. The time has come. The right leg is warmed up, rested, and ready for glory. David took a step back involuntarily. Benjamin stopped mid-movement of getting up and looked at her with the expression of a man who was seriously reconsidering every decision that had brought him to that moment. What are you? The pom-poms are magic, shaking them with more energy. You can't see them, but you can feel them. Right leg, do you hear that? That noise? Those are your fans. Both of them. Me and David. I didn't. David started. David too. He's just shy. Come on, Benjamin. The room is on its feet. The room had 3 people, and none were technically on their feet except Nora herself. But that was a detail. Benjamin looked at David. David looked at Benjamin with the expression of a man who has no answer for that specific situation and is at peace with that. Is she always like this? He asked. I only found out this week, Benjamin replied. Go. Nora shook the pom-poms toward the bars. Don't stand there talking to David. David already cheered. Now, it's up to you. Benjamin closed his eyes for 2 seconds, took a deep breath, and stood up. His hands went to the bars, his arms took the weight, and the right leg that had moved inches earlier at enormous cost, began to move again. That's it. Nora lowered her voice to an intense whisper, the pom-poms now in slow, deliberate motion, as if she were conducting an orchestra. That's it, Benjamin. Slowly. You've got this. The leg knows. The body knows. Let them know. 1 step. Yes, she shouted, the pom-poms exploding upward. Another step. 2 steps. David, write that down. This is historic. Already wrote it down. David said, and there was something in his voice that was not professional neutrality. It was poorly disguised emotion. Benjamin took the 3rd step and stopped, not because he couldn't go further, because he chose to stop, his arms still firm on the bars, his breathing heavy but controlled, and his eyes open looking at the mirror in front of him as if he were seeing something he hadn't seen in a long time. Nora slowly lowered the pom-poms. The silence that arrived was different from all the other silences of the night. It was the silence of after. Of when something truly happened and everyone in the room knows it, but nobody wants to be the first to speak and break it. David was the first to move. He grabbed the towel, went to Benjamin, placed it on his shoulders with a light pat that said more than any physical therapy protocol. Best session in 2 years, he said, simple and direct. Benjamin didn't respond, but his eyes went to Nora in the mirror. And she saw. Not the CEO. Not the man with ice blue eyes and controlled expression who fired people for 7 minutes in the bathroom. Just Benjamin, with sweat on his face and an open shirt and 3 steps that had taken 2 years to happen. And something in his eyes she didn't know how to name, but that made her hold the imaginary pom-poms a little tighter before slowly putting them away behind her back. David helped Benjamin back into the wheelchair. I'll put away the equipment, he said, and left with the discretion of someone who understands that certain conversations need space. The silence between them now was only theirs. Thank you, Benjamin said. Low, simple, without qualification. For shouting embarrassing things with imaginary pom-poms? For not feeling sorry for me. Nora was quiet for a moment. Why would I feel sorry for you? she said. You're fighting to walk again. That's not sad. It's the most determined thing I've ever seen in my entire life. She paused. And I've watched my mother convince a supermarket employee to reorganize the entire cereal aisle. Determination, I recognize. Benjamin did that thing with his mouth. It wasn't a smile yet. It was what came before the smile when he was still deciding if he could afford one. Come tomorrow, he said suddenly. What? At 8 at night. He looked at her with that expression that was no longer completely closed. Physical therapy session. If you're going to find out my secrets, you might as well be useful. You're inviting me to watch your physical therapy. I'm already regretting it. I'll bring the pom-poms. The pom-poms don't exist. Yes, they do. You felt them. Admit it. He was silent for 3 seconds. No pom-poms, he said. With pom-poms. Nora, Benjamin. Another silence. No making noise, he gave in. Silent pom-poms. I can work with that. And then he smiled. For real. Not the corner of the mouth from the previous days. Not the muffled sound from the meeting. A real smile, small but whole, that arrived slowly as if it were remembering the way. Nora stored that smile in a specific place in her heart. The place where you keep the things you don't want to forget. She left with the folder she had gone to get an hour earlier and which had spent most of the time forgotten on the floor. In the empty elevator, going down alone, she looked at her own reflection in the mirrored walls. Okay, Lord Whiskers, she murmured into the phone while calling a cab. When I get home, I'm going to tell you everything. The cab took 4 minutes. Time enough to stand on the sidewalk looking at the dark building, only the emergency lights visible through the glass, and think that somewhere inside there was a small room with parallel bars and mirrors, and a man who tried again every night. Alone. Until today. On Friday at 8 at night, the 35th floor was empty again. Exactly like Thursday. Except that this time Nora had no forgotten folder as an excuse. This time she was there because she had been invited. Which, considering the invitation had come from the most intimidating man she knew to watch physical therapy at 8 at night in an empty building, was either very special or very strange. Probably both. Okay, she murmured to the elevator as she went up. Second time. You already know the protocol. Go in, sit down, cheer, don't shout so loud that the security guard downstairs calls the police. The elevator didn't comment. Progress, she said, satisfied. Benjamin was already at the bars when she walked in. David nodded at her, with the air of a man who had processed the events of Thursday night and arrived at peace with the new reality. Benjamin didn't turn around, but his shoulders shifted slightly. That specific tension of someone who realized they were no longer alone and was still deciding what to do with that. You came, he said. I said I would. I thought you might reconsider. I don't reconsider commitments. She sat down on the bench, placed her bag on the floor, and slipped her hands behind her back with the solemnity of an established ritual. The pom-poms came too. Benjamin briefly closed his eyes. I said no noise. Silent pom-poms. As agreed, she shook them in the air in a slow, controlled movement, completely without sound. See? Pure professionalism. David coughed, hiding something. Can we begin? Benjamin asked, and there was something different in his tone. Not irritation, something she was learning to recognize as his version of thank you for being here, wrapped in light sarcasm, because it was the wrapping paper he knew how to use. The session began, and this time it was different. Not easier. The effort was the same, the trembling was the same, the sweat running down his face was the same, but there was something in the room that hadn't been there on Thursday. A different energy. As if the body knew it wasn't entirely alone this time, and was using that somehow in a way that science could probably explain, but that Nora preferred not to reduce to an explanation. She stayed quiet for most of it. The silent pom-poms moved slowly. She shook them gently each time he tried, paused when he rested, and sped up when he made progress. A choreography that nobody beyond the two of them and David could see, but which was absolutely happening. On the third set, when Benjamin took 4 steps, one more than on Thursday, Nora stood up from the bench involuntarily. The pom-poms went up, silent, but Benjamin saw in the mirror, and the corner of his mouth moved. David said, marking it on the tablet with the voice of someone trying to sound neutral and not quite managing. 4. Nora confirmed, in a whisper that had the energy of a contained shout. "Is that a record?" "It is," David said. She looked at the imaginary pom-poms in her own hands. She shook them once. Just once. Slowly. For Benjamin in the mirror. He looked away, but not before she saw the small smile he was keeping. At 9:15, when the session ended and David began putting away the equipment with his usual discretion, Benjamin was in the wheelchair with the towel on his shoulders and his breathing returning to normal. "4 steps," Nora said, sitting on the bench. "They're 4 steps. They're 4 more than yesterday." She put the pom-poms away behind her back with ceremony. The pom-poms did that. The pom-poms don't exist. The record exists. Coincidence? I don't think so. Benjamin looked at her with that expression she was collecting. The mix of resignation and something that didn't have a name yet but was becoming easier to recognize. "Same time next week," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'll be here," she replied, and left. The driver was on the sidewalk. Waiting for Nora to come down, it wasn't Benjamin who called him but his mother, Margaret Hayes, because yes, she knows everything. Dark suit, impeccable posture, holding a box with navy blue tissue paper, satin ribbon, and the specific patience of someone who had received clear instructions and doesn't question clear instructions. Nora stopped on the sidewalk, looked at the man, at the box, at the black car behind him, at the man again. "Miss Harrison?" he said. "Yes?" "From Mrs. Hayes." He extended the box with both hands as if it were a museum artifact. Hand delivery. Specific instruction. "How long have you been here?" "Since 9, the session always ends at the same time." Nora looked at the clock on her phone. 9:22. "I also have orders to take you home, Mrs. Hayes," he said, with the neutrality of a professional who had learned that certain questions always had the same answer. Knows everything. Nora took the box. There was a note attached to the ribbon, handwritten on paper with a monogram MH embossed in gold relief. "Wear this. Don't argue. You'll need armor. MH." She opened the box right there on the sidewalk, navy blue silk fabric. Simple in structure, extraordinary in the details. The kind of piece that didn't shout money because it didn't need to. It simply existed with the confidence of something that knows exactly what it is. "Okay?" she said to the dress, holding it up in front of herself, while the driver waited with patience. "You're beautiful. I know you're beautiful. The problem is that you were clearly made for someone who knows what they're doing." The driver didn't blink. "Armor," she murmured, looking at the note. She said armor. She folded the note carefully, tucked it in her pocket, and looked at the building behind her. 35th floor. Lights off. Somewhere inside, a man had taken 4 steps today. And tomorrow, she was going to need armor. "Come on, miss, I have orders to take you home." The annual Hayes International Charity Dinner was legendary. Not in the vague sense people use for anything they want to seem important. Truly legendary. The kind of event that appeared in society columns, that had a waiting list for sponsors, that brought together in the same ballroom people who normally only crossed paths in headlines. The limousine arrived at Nora's apartment on Saturday at 6 on the dot. She came down with the dress, the shoes that Margaret had also provided. They arrived Saturday morning with a separate note that said only the shoes complete the armor. And the energy of someone who had spent 40 minutes practicing how to sit elegantly without wrinkling expensive fabric. Lord Whiskers had watched the rehearsals with the expression of a jury deliberating a difficult verdict. Benjamin was already inside the limousine. Black tuxedo, perfectly combed hair, the version of him that appeared on business magazine covers. When Nora got in, he turned and stopped, 3 full seconds where he just looked. "I know," she said, sitting with archaeological care. "I look like someone dressed up as an elegant person. Your mother has expensive taste. I promise not to ruin the dress." "You look beautiful," he said, simple, direct, without qualification. Nora's face warmed to a degree she hoped the low lighting of the limousine would conceal. "Thank you. You are," she gestured in his direction, "you know, in the tuxedo. Very much that British spy style. Fewer explosions, more spreadsheets, but still." The corner of his mouth moved. Nervous, terrified. "I'm going to be surrounded by people who have more money in their wallets than I earn in a year." She looked at her own hands. "How many forks are needed for a salad?" 4. 3. "See, I already got it wrong." "Nora?" There was something gentle in his tone. Just be yourself. I'm not sure if that's reassuring or terrifying. The limousine stopped in front of the plaza. The flashes lit up their faces even before the door opened. The Plaza Hotel at night was the kind of place that made people feel they had entered another dimension. 400 people. Crystal chandeliers, tables with white silk tablecloths, beautiful floral arrangements. Margaret appeared out of nowhere as always, stunning in a silver gala gown. "Nora, darling. Perfect." She kissed both cheeks, looked at Benjamin. "Close your mouth, Benjamin." "I wasn't, you were." She winked at Nora. "Have fun." "And Benjamin? Smile. You're being photographed." And she disappeared. Nora looked at Benjamin. "Your mother is a force of nature. Since 1958. The night went reasonably well. Nora survived the cocktail hour without spilling champagne. She figured out the salad fork was the smallest one on the left. Too late for the bread, just in time for the first course. She referred to the caviar as expensive fish eggs at a slightly inappropriate volume. And she ran into Stella in a red dress that looked like it was made of liquid fire and intention. "Nora." Stella's eyes did the quick, calculated sweep. "That dress of yours is bold. Did Margaret choose it?" "It has pockets," Nora replied, slipping her hands in to demonstrate. Stella smiled with her mouth. She went to her table. Benjamin, beside Nora, did that thing with his mouth. But he was almost smiling. When the time for the speech came, Benjamin pushed the wheels toward the podium, a fluid, natural movement, and put on the lapel microphone because the podium microphone was fixed. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you for..." The lapel microphone, pinned to his tuxedo lapel, let out a hiss, then died. Benjamin touched the microphone. Nothing. Tested it again. Nothing. On the other side of the ballroom, near the technical control table, Stella was adjusting something on a tablet with the smile of someone who is exactly where they plan to be. Nora saw the tablet, saw the smile, saw Benjamin testing the microphone for the third time while 400 people waited in silence that was becoming uncomfortable. And she saw the moment, that specific moment when he began to close himself off, to raise the walls, to transform the man of the 4 steps back into the impenetrable CEO. No. She stood up. She walked to the podium with the most controlled steps she could manage, because the dress was expensive and the shoes were new and Margaret had said armor, not accident. Benjamin looked at her surprised. "The lapel microphone died," she murmured, arriving beside him. "But the fixed one on the podium should still be working." She lightly touched the microphone, which picked up and echoed through the ballroom. "Talk to me. I'll repeat. Nora, trust me. 3 seconds." He nodded. He spoke softly, just for her. And Nora, with the fixed microphone and 400 people, repeated. "This foundation represents hope," Benjamin said. "This foundation represents hope," Nora repeated, "and the generosity of all of you who are here because you truly care." Murmurs of approval. Benjamin continued. She repeated. And then, because she was Nora and her filters had decided to take the night off, the translations began to take on a life of their own. "Together we can make a difference," he said. "Together we can make a difference," she repeated. "And separately too, but together is more efficient." Teamwork, folks. Very underrated. Laughter through the ballroom. Benjamin looked at her. His eyes clearly said, "What are you doing?" But the rest of his face was betraying the answer. "Thank you for your continued support," he said. "Thank you for your continued support," she repeated. "Which includes the generous donations that your accountants are going to love come tax time. Just saying." The ballroom was truly laughing now. And Benjamin, who had practiced neutrality as a discipline for years, had his shoulders slightly different, his breathing slightly different, the corner of his mouth completely different. "Our mission is clear," he said. "Our mission is clear," she repeated, and then paused half a second. "Wait, what's the mission again?" The ballroom laughed. Benjamin looked at her with that expression. "To provide accessible technology to vulnerable communities," he said. "Patient?" "That's it," she repeated to the room. "Providing accessible technology to vulnerable communities." Very important, very noble, much more inspiring than I could have summarized on my own. Scattered, amused applause. Benjamin closed his eyes for 2 seconds. When he opened them, he had completely given up on not smiling. He finished the speech smiling. In front of 400 people. The ovation was long and genuine. When he came down from the stage, he went straight to her. You modified my speech. I saved your speech, with comments about income tax, which were relevant and informative. He held her hand. Brief, light, but he held it. Nobody else would have done that, he said. Nobody else would have dared. Exactly. On the other side of the ballroom, Stella watched, fists clenched, tablet in hand. In her eyes, not anger, something colder, more calculated, planning. Nora didn't see. She was busy noticing that Benjamin still hadn't let go of her hand, and thinking that navy blue dress armor with pockets was, definitively, the best kind. Stella Ward didn't waste time. Monday morning, 7:45, still before most of the 35th floor had arrived, she was at Nora's desk. Not sitting, standing, with the folder and the smile that didn't reach her eyes, and her voice low enough that nobody but Nora could hear. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. Nora said almost nothing during the 8 minutes. When Stella left, her heels echoing on the still empty marble, Nora stayed seated looking at the glass desk for a time she herself couldn't measure. Then she turned on the computer, opened the calendar, and started working. Benjamin noticed at 9:15. He walked past Nora's desk on his way to his office and heard nothing. No "good morning, computer, you're cooperating today." No comments about the coffee being too hot or the elevator making that sound of existential judgment. No narration of absolutely anything. Just Nora, seated, typing, eyes on the screen. "Good morning, Miss Harrison." "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." She didn't look up. "The quarterly reports are in your inbox. The 10 o'clock meeting has been confirmed. Your coffee is at the correct temperature." He stopped, waited, nothing. "Thank you," he said finally. "You're welcome, Mr. Hayes." And she went back to typing. Benjamin went into his office, closed the door, and stood looking at her through the glass for 3 seconds that seemed longer than they should. Priya was the first to formally notice. At 10:30, she stopped at Nora's desk with a folder under her arm and the file she needed to find as an excuse. "Hey, Nora. Did you see where I left the third drawer on the left?" Nora said, without looking up. "Blue folder. Second divider." Priya opened the drawer, found the file exactly where Nora had said. "Thanks." She waited. "Are you okay?" "Perfectly fine. You didn't comment on the file being exactly where I didn't look for it. It's properly organized." "No comment needed." Priya stepped back 2 steps with the expression of someone processing an anomaly. At 11, Josh from finance knocked over a pile of pens near the coffee station. 6 pens. On the floor. Scattered in a generous radius. In a normal week, Nora would have said something about pens and organized rebellion or an office supply mutiny. She walked by, helped gather the pens in silence, and went back to her desk. Josh stood looking at the pens in his hand with the expression of a man who missed the finish line without realizing he was in a race. At 11:40, the printer made the noise. That specific noise, the mechanical squeal that invariably preceded the paper jam, which invariably preceded Nora's comment about the printer having communication issues that only group therapy could solve. Nora went to the printer, opened the cover, removed the jammed paper with clinical efficiency, closed the cover, went back to her desk. In absolute silence. Marcus, the intern, slowly turned to Priya. "She didn't say anything to the printer," he whispered. "I saw. That's concerning. Someone should—" "I don't know what to do," Priya admitted. "It's like when the weather suddenly changes and you know something is wrong but you can't identify what." "Nora is the weather," Marcus said. "Nora is the weather," Priya confirmed. The 2 o'clock meeting was the most silent of the week. Not because the executives talked less, they talked the same amount about the same subjects with the same charts. But Nora was in the corner, taking notes, and said absolutely nothing beyond what was directly asked of her, once, about a file, which she answered with surgical precision and returned to silence. Benjamin ran the meeting with impeccable efficiency. But twice, Priya counted because Priya was counting, his eyes went to the corner where Nora was seated, and came back to the table without finding what they were looking for. On Wednesday afternoon, elevator 3 made the noise. The metallic screech between the 26th and 25th that sounded exactly like mechanical judgment in real time. Nora was inside, alone. She looked at the ceiling, opened her mouth, closed it. The doors opened on the 23rd floor, and she walked out without saying a word. The elevator stayed there, doors open, as if waiting. Nothing. The doors closed. Benjamin called her to his office at 5:45. "You can close the door," he said. She closed it. She stood, hands clasped, professional meeting posture. "Sit down." She sat. He studied her for a moment, the tension lines around her mouth that weren't there last week, the eyes looking at him without the brightness he had learned to look for without realizing he was looking for it. "Stella talked to you," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "What did she say?" Nora was silent for 2 seconds. "That my behavior was inappropriate for the environment, that I was damaging your image, that I should act like a true professional." A pause. "Or consider other options." Benjamin felt something harden in his chest. "And you believed her?" "She wasn't entirely wrong. She was entirely wrong." "Benjamin," she said, and there was something different in her tone. Not the Nora who shouted with pom-poms or negotiated with elevators, something quieter, more real. "I spilled coffee on a $20,000 rug. I compared you to a penguin in an executive meeting. I translated your speech with income tax comments in front of 400 people. She looked at her hands. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't belong here." "Nora, it's true that Nora Harrison?" He leaned slightly forward, and there was something in his voice she hadn't heard yet. Not anger, not coldness, but real urgency. "Are you listening to me?" She looked up. "I spent 2 years in this building, surrounded by impeccable, efficient, and completely empty people. Each word coming out with the weight of something that had been kept too long. Meetings that started and ended, and I walked out the same as I walked in. Days that passed without leaving anything behind." He paused. "And then you showed up, talking to elevators and narrating disasters, and I remembered what it felt like to be alive." The silence that followed had texture. Nora blinked. "Once, you... What?" "Don't change," he said firmly. "Don't let Stella or anyone else erase who you are." She opened her mouth to respond. And that was when it happened. Tears. Not the dramatic, rehearsed kind of crying. The involuntary kind. Just one tear that rolled down before she could intercept it, which she immediately wiped away with the back of her hand, with the efficiency of someone trying to pretend didn't happen. "Sorry," she said, her voice slightly different. She pointed to her own face, completely unprofessional. "I'm fine. I'm great. It was the air conditioning. It dries out your eyes. No issue. I'll talk to maintenance." Benjamin kept looking at her with that new expression, the one she was still learning but which was becoming easier to recognize. "Okay, Nora," she murmured to herself, wiping her eye again. "Don't cry in the CEO's office. That's definitely not professional. Not at all. Not, Nora." She stopped. "Thank you," he said. "For this whole week, for the pom-poms, for the speech, for seeing the steps and not feeling sorry, for genuinely cheering." She took a deep breath. "4, she corrected, her voice still slightly different. "On Friday it was 4. The corner of his mouth moved. 4, he agreed. She stood up, grabbed the tablet, and went toward the door with what was left of her composure. At the door she stopped. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yes?" She turned around. "Tomorrow at 8. A pause. "The pom-poms are already confirmed," and she left before he could respond. Outside, she leaned against the wall for 2 seconds, eyes closed, breathing, then walked back to her desk. The printer made the noise. That noise. Nora looked at it. "I heard you," she said. "I missed you too." Marcus on the other side of the hallway silently pumped his fist in the air. Priya closed her eyes with the relief of someone seeing the sun appear after 3 days of rain, and the 35th floor breathed. The summons arrived by email at 10 in the morning. Subject: Urgent meeting, conference room B, 10:30. From Stella Ward, Director of Public Relations. Nora read it twice. "Okay," she murmured to the monitor. "Urgent meeting with Stella. That can be anything but good." She paused. "No, you know what? No, you're back. You're yourself. You have pom-poms. Go in there and face it." The monitor didn't respond, but she considered that silent support. Conference room B was on the 12th floor, 3 doors past human resources, and had clearly been decorated by someone who believed intimidation was a matter of architecture. Stella was seated at the head of the table, with the composure of someone who had rehearsed every detail. Impeccable white suit, leather folder on the table, and the smile. Yes, that fake smile of hers. "Have a seat, Nora." Nora sat. "I'll be direct," Stella said without preamble. "You don't belong here." "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Stella opened the folder. This company has standards, a reputation. You are a barista who somehow won the sympathy of Margaret Hayes and the attention of Benjamin. She paused with the timing of someone who knows exactly where the knife goes in. But sympathy is not competence, and attention, she slid a sheet across the table, is not permanence. Nora looked at the paper. Resignation letter, her name, date, signature line. 3-month salary as compensation. Generous, given the length of service. Stella pushed a pen alongside the sheet. Sign this and it ends here. No drama, no embarrassment. Nora looked at the pen, at the signature line, at her name printed on that paper as if the decision had already been made. Her hands stayed still in her lap. What if I don't sign? Stella tilted her head slightly. Then I make your time here much more difficult than it already is. A pause. I think I've already demonstrated that I have that ability. Nora picked up the pen, looked at it, and set it back on the table. No, Stella blinked. Excuse me? I'm not going to sign. Nora stood up, and there was something different in her voice. Not anger, not fear, but that specific clarity that appears when someone stops trying to be smaller than they are. You know what I realized? You're not worried about Benjamin. You're worried about yourself, because for the first time in years he's different, and it's not because of you. Nora, I work hard. Do I make mistakes? Yes. Do I talk to myself? Constantly. But I genuinely care. She picked up her bag. And I'm not signing any paper because you can't handle that. Stella stood up. Leave, she said. Now, with pleasure. Nora left and went straight to the restroom on the 12th floor. Not because she needed to, because the restroom was the only place in the entire building where she could have 2 minutes of silence without anyone expecting anything from her. Or almost silence. She stood in front of the mirror, hands resting on the sink, looking at her own reflection. Okay, she said to the mirror. You did it. You didn't sign. You said everything you needed to say. That was brave. A pause. She told you to leave. Out of her own office. As if you were a problem to be discarded. As if 3 months' salary were enough to buy your dignity. She took a deep breath. They're not. The restroom door opened. A woman from the legal department walked in, saw Nora in the mirror, assessed the situation in half a second, and went directly to the farthest stall without making eye contact. Sorry, Nora said to the mirror, processing out loud. I needed to vent. Thank you for being a great listener. No response from the stall. I'm leaving now, she added. And she did. The 12th floor lobby was busy. Lunch hour approaching, people moving through, the normal flow of a corporate building on a Thursday morning. Nora pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. 7 people were already inside. Josh from finance, Marcus the intern, 2 women from human resources she recognized by sight, and 3 people from legal who had probably just left the same meeting as the woman in the restroom. She got in, pressed the 35th floor, leaned against the wall, and tried to stay quiet. It lasted 40 seconds. Okay, she murmured, looking at her own reflection in the mirrored elevator wall. You survived. You didn't sign. Your dignity is intact. 70% of it at least. Josh adjusted his glasses. Marcus looked at the ceiling. Stella Ward is a piece of work, she continued, her voice rising a notch without conscious authorization. Like, I understand she's powerful and strategic and probably wakes up perfect every day. But was there really a need for a resignation letter with my name printed on it as if it were already a done deal? The elevator got very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when 7 people simultaneously decide not to move. And another thing, she continued, completely committed now, no turning back. She sabotaged Benjamin's lapel microphone at the plaza dinner on Saturday. I saw it. She was at the control table with the tablet, and she had that smile, you know? The smile of someone who just did exactly what they planned. Who does that at a charity event? Absolute silence. The elevator stopped on the 18th floor. 3 people got in. 10 pairs of eyes were looking at her now. She looked around, talking to myself. Loudly. Josh said. Very loudly, Marcus confirmed. With specific details, one of the human resources women added. It's a condition, Nora said. Genetic. My mother has it too. The elevator stopped on the 23rd. 3 more people got in, 13 witnesses. Nora stayed leaning against the wall with the expression of someone who had just realized there was no elegant exit available. You can continue, Marcus said. It was getting interesting. I can't continue, Marcus, because I wasn't talking to anyone. I was processing internally in an external voice, which is completely different, and the doors opened on the 28th floor. Stella walked in. The silence was instant and different from all previous silences. Stella looked at the packed elevator, at the expressions, at Nora leaning against the wall with the face of someone who would very much like to be another person in that specific moment. "What is going on here?" she asked. Nobody answered right away. Then Marcus, blessed, brave, completely reckless Marcus, said in a volume inappropriate for a closed space. Nora was narrating a corporate scandal in real time. Stella slowly turned to Nora. Nora straightened her shoulders, talking to myself. "It's a condition. Documented." "Almost. You just accused me of sabotage in front of 13 people, Josh completed, helpful as always." "I wasn't talking to you." Stella took a deep breath, recovering control with visible effort. "This is completely..." The elevator stopped on the 35th floor. The doors opened, and there was Benjamin, hands on the rim of the wheelchair, looking at the packed elevator with the expression of a man who had arrived in the middle of something and was collecting information before acting. He looked at the 13 people. At Stella with her face flushed, at Nora with the expression of someone who wished she had taken elevator 1, 2, or maybe 3. "Would anyone like to explain?" he said with the specific calm of someone who had seen a lot. Priya, who was in the hallway with her phone in hand, turned the screen toward Benjamin without saying anything. The video call was still open. Marcus, inside the elevator, gave a discreet wave to the camera and pocketed his phone with the naturalness of someone who hadn't done anything extraordinary. "She saw everything," he said. "Nora exposed Stella for sabotaging the lapel microphone at the dinner and for trying to force her to resign," Priya said, straight to the point. "In the elevator," Marcus added. "With 13 witnesses," Josh finished, adjusting his glasses with satisfaction. Benjamin looked at Stella. "Is it true?" "Benjamin, let me explain. Is it true?" he repeated. Colder this time. Stella opened her mouth, closed it. Her shoulders dropped 2 millimeters. A small, almost invisible movement, but one that said everything that needed to be said. She stepped out of the elevator without responding, her heels echoing on the marble, and disappeared down the hallway without looking back. The 13 people filed out with the discretion of those who understand that the next act is for 2 people only. Benjamin pushed the wheels into the elevator. He pressed the emergency stop button. The doors closed. Just the 2 of them. "You exposed the director of public relations," he said. "In the elevator, with 13 witnesses. It was an accident. I was talking to myself. It's a condition. My mother has it too, I know." The corner of his mouth. "Nora, you just did what corporate lawyers spend months trying to build. You exposed misconduct with enough witnesses to make it impossible to ignore. So, I'm not fired? You're being promoted." Nora blinked. "What? Vice President of Human Development." He looked at her directly. "My mother is going to love it. She's been suggesting it for days. Your mother knew this was going to happen?" "My mother knew before you even stepped into that elevator." "That is," Nora processed, reassuring and terrifying at the same time. "That's her in general." The doors opened on the 35th floor. The hallway was full. Priya, Josh, Marcus, the 2 human resources women, the IT guy who always forgot his extension, and more people who had arrived in the minutes the elevator was stopped, because on the 35th floor, news traveled at the speed of corporate light. Benjamin pushed the wheels out of the elevator. "Get back to work," he said. "The show is over." But as they dispersed, Nora heard, "She's a legend." Priya whispered to Marcus. "Best thing I've ever seen in this building," Marcus confirmed. "Someone should record these things," Josh said, adjusting his glasses for the 3rd time. Nora went to her desk, sat down, breathed, looked at the computer. "Okay," she said to the screen. "You just got promoted for talking to yourself in an elevator. If that's not a sign that the universe has specific plans for you, I don't know what is." The printer made the noise. "I completely agree," she said to the printer. And for the first time in that complicated week, she truly smiled. The most important press conference of the year had been scheduled for a Tuesday morning. 200 journalists, 20 media outlets, live broadcast for investors on 4 continents, and Benjamin Hayes announcing the largest international expansion in Hayes International's history. 3 new markets, billion-dollar contracts, the kind of news that changes stock value in real time. All planned with surgical precision. All except for the hoarseness. Nora was backstage organizing the last press folders when she heard it. Benjamin cleared his throat, and the sound that came out was not the normal sound. She turned. He had his back to her, speech folder in hand, impeccable navy blue suit, but the hand holding the folder was slightly more tense than usual, and he cleared his throat again with that specific discretion of someone trying to solve a problem before anyone notices the problem exists. "You're hoarse," she said. "I'm fine." "Benjamin, I'm fine," he repeated, and his voice confirmed exactly the opposite. Nora looked at him, at his throat, at the folder. At the auditorium on the other side of the curtain, where 200 journalists were waiting with cameras, recorders, and the limited patience of people with deadlines. "Since when?" "Woke up this way. It'll pass. And if it doesn't pass in the next," she checked the time, 4 minutes? "It'll pass," he said in the tone that closed subjects. Nora was quiet, but she slipped her hand behind her back discreetly. The pom-poms were in standby position. The announcer introduced Benjamin Hayes with the energy of someone who had practiced that specific phrase in the mirror. Benjamin pushed the wheels toward the stage with the posture of a man who doesn't put off the inevitable. Nora stayed backstage. She watched him reach the podium. Position the wheelchair. Adjust the microphone. Open the folder. "Good morning," he began, and the voice came out. Hoarse, low, still controlled, still Benjamin, but clearly compromised in a way that the professional microphone amplified instead of hiding. Discreet murmurs in the front rows. Benjamin continued. "Hayes International is pleased to announce today the largest expansion in its history." The voice faltered. It didn't disappear. It faltered. That specific moment where the vocal cords simply don't deliver what the brain asked for, and the sound that comes out is half of what it should be. Benjamin stopped, cleared his throat. Tried again. The largest expansion, it faltered again. The auditorium went very quiet. Not the quiet of respect, the uncomfortable quiet of 200 people who don't know whether to look or look away. And Nora, backstage, saw the moment. The same moment as the dinner. The same moment as the parallel bars. Benjamin beginning to close himself off, to raise the walls, to turn vulnerability into stone. No, no. She stepped out from backstage. She walked along the side corridor of the auditorium with the fastest and quietest steps she could manage. She went up the 3 steps to the stage. She reached the podium before Benjamin realized what was happening. When he did, she already had her hand on the microphone. "What are you?" "I know the entire speech," she murmured, low enough that only he could hear. "I was in every preparation meeting. I read every version." She looked at him directly. "Trust me." For 3 seconds, Benjamin looked at her, at the auditorium, back at her, and nodded. Nora turned to face 200 journalists, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. "Good morning," she said, and her voice filled the auditorium with total clarity. "My name is Nora Harrison, Vice President of Human Development at Hayes International." A half-second pause. "And today I will be the voice of Mr. Hayes, who woke up hoarse but refused to cancel, because, as you well know, he doesn't cancel anything." Laughter. Real laughter. From 200 journalists who had arrived expecting protocol and were receiving something completely different. Benjamin, beside her at the podium, made a discreet gesture with his hand, 2 fingers pointing forward, a clear signal of, "Get to the point, numbers first." Nora looked at the gesture, interpreted it. "And Mr. Hayes would like to start by thanking you all for being here," she said to the auditorium. "Because he is a man of deep gratitude. Very deep. Rarely expressed, but deep." Benjamin closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. That was not what the gesture meant. He tried again. "Open hand, downward motion, take it slow, don't improvise." "And he wants everyone to be comfortable," Nora announced. "No rush. This is a historic moment, and it deserves to be experienced with calm and full attention." A journalist in the 3rd row was clearly trying not to laugh. Benjamin looked at his own hand as if it had betrayed him. He tried a different gesture. He pointed to the open folder in front of Nora, clearly indicating, "Read what's written, stop improvising." Nora looked at the pointing finger. "He is pointing to the future," she said, with total conviction. "Metaphorically. It's very poetic of him. I always knew there was a philosopher beneath the CEO." The auditorium laughed for real now. Benjamin put his hand over his face. And then, because there was nothing left to do, because the gestures were clearly not working as planned, because Nora Harrison was a force of nature that followed no direction when she was in motion, he simply stopped trying to guide her and watched. Nora found her rhythm. Not the rhythm of the rehearsed corporate speech. Her rhythm, the one that appeared when she was completely present, completely herself, without filter and without fear. "Hayes International is expanding to 3 new international markets," she said, and this time it was real information, from the speech delivered with the clarity of someone who knew every figure by heart. "Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Contracts with a total value of $2 billion. She paused, "Which is a lot of money." I had to sit down when I saw that number for the first time. Mr. Hayes didn't even blink, but he has more practice with zeros than I do. Laughter. "Each market was chosen based on 3 years of analysis," she continued, walking the stage now, gesturing naturally. "This was not a spreadsheet decision. It was a people decision. Mr. Hayes spent months visiting each region, talking with local partners, understanding what each community truly needed." She stepped down from the stage. She walked down the center aisle between the rows of journalists, and the entire auditorium turned. 200 pairs of eyes following that woman who had stepped out from backstage 20 minutes earlier and was conducting the most important press conference of the year as if she had been born to do it. "Accessible technology," she said, stopping in the middle of the aisle, looking at the rows around her. "That is the mission. Not technology for those who already have everything. Technology for those who never had access. For communities that were forgotten. For people who deserve the same tools the rest of the world uses, as if it were obvious." Silence. Not the uncomfortable silence of the beginning, the silence of when an entire room is truly listening. She walked slowly back to the stage, climbed the steps, and arrived at the podium where Benjamin was standing, and then she looked at him. "Mr. Hayes has something to add," she said softly now. "Not about numbers, about the why." Benjamin looked at her, and for the first time that morning, he spoke. Hoarse, low, but real. 2 years ago," he said, and the microphone picked up every imperfect syllable, "I thought I knew exactly what this company was. What I was." A pause. "I was wrong on both counts." Nora repeated for the auditorium, word for word. "Strength," he continued, "is not about not needing anyone. It's about finding the right people and having the courage to let them help." She repeated. Her voice was different now, quieter, more real. "This expansion," he said, looking at her, not at the auditorium, "is about believing that the best is still to come. Even when you don't plan for it, even when your voice fails, even when someone shows up out of nowhere and conducts your press conference in a way you definitely did not approve in advance." The auditorium laughed. Nora repeated everything, including the last part, and this time her voice trembled. Just a little, just enough. That was when she saw it. In the middle rows, a journalist had lowered the professional camera and raised his phone. Then another, then 5, then 20. Not as journalists covering a corporate event, as people witnessing something they couldn't let pass, that primitive instinct of those who recognize a real moment when they see one and know that the professional camera will capture the event, but the phone will capture the moment. Close up. Shaky. 2 people at the podium. Studio lights and all, but something in that scene that no professional lighting could manufacture. Authenticity. The auditorium erupted in applause before the speech had even formally ended. On their feet. Everyone. 200 journalists who had been covering corporate coldness for years, on their feet, applauding as if they were at the theater. Benjamin looked at Nora, and there was something in that look she didn't know how to name yet. Too big, too real. The kind you store without knowing you're storing it. That was when the voice cut through the auditorium. "With all due respect." A woman, 3rd row, gray suit, notebook closed on her lap, the specific posture of someone who had not stood to applaud and did not intend to. Black hair pinned up, thin-framed glasses, the kind of expression that journalists from serious outlets use when they want everyone to know they are being serious. The applause faded. slowly, row by row. "I represent the Financial Investment Review," she said, her voice clear and unapologetic. "We came here for data, for analysis, for information that our readers, real investors with real decisions to make, need to evaluate this expansion." She looked at Nora on the stage. "What we watched was entertainment, improvisation. With all due respect to Miss Harrison, this is a corporate press conference, not a show." Absolute silence. 200 people who had been standing 30 seconds before, now seated, recalibrating, that collective doubt of those who no longer know what to think. Benjamin opened his mouth. His voice failed, too hoarse, too compromised. Nora felt every word from the journalist land in her chest like a stone. Not because they were cruel, because they weren't entirely wrong. She had stepped onto that stage on impulse. She had walked between the rows because it had felt right in that moment. She had said things that weren't in the script, revealed things that weren't hers to reveal. Turned a billion-dollar press conference into something that, she understood now, seeing it through the journalist's eyes, could very well look like a lack of seriousness. "You're right," Nora said into the microphone. The journalist blinked, slightly surprised. "All the data is in the press folder each of you received at the entrance, pages 3 through 12. Complete market analysis, 5-year projections, contract structure." She took a deep breath. "Mr. Hayes will answer specific questions in writing later today, given his voice situation. And I apologize if today's format did not meet everyone's expectations. Professional, direct, no improvisation." The journalist nodded once and wrote something in her notebook. The announcer took back control. He closed the conference with the press office contact information. People started standing up, talking, picking up the folders. Normal, corporate. The way it should have been from the start. Nora stepped down from the stage slowly. Benjamin looked at her, and there was something urgent in that look. He wanted to speak, she could see that, but the voice wasn't going to cooperate, and there were already 3 journalists approaching with questions and a publicist pulling his arm. She raised her hand briefly. Not a wave. Not a goodbye. Just, "I know. Go. I'm okay," and she left through the side exit. The hallway was empty and cold. She leaned against the wall, closed her eyes. "Okay, Nora," she murmured. "You just conducted a billionaire's press conference, walked between journalists, made the entire auditorium laugh and then go quiet, and then give a standing ovation." A pause. And then a journalist from a serious outlet stood up and said exactly what Stella always said, that you don't belong here, that you are entertainment, that you are out of place in this world. The muffled noise of the auditorium came through the closed door. Nora stayed there for a long moment, thinking about the journalist, thinking about Stella, thinking about the 3 months she had spent in that building, the heroic cappuccino, the pom-poms, the 4 steps, the hand he had held at the plaza, and thinking that maybe, truly loving someone meant knowing when your presence did more harm than good. She was not from his world. She never had been. And continuing to pretend otherwise would only hurt him more. He deserved someone who didn't turn a press conference into a comedy, who didn't need a journalist to remind her of the place she didn't belong. She pushed off the wall, walked down the empty hallway toward the elevator, and didn't go back to the auditorium. Inside, Benjamin was being surrounded by publicists and journalists. He answered with gestures, his voice too compromised for long conversation, and searched for her with his eyes, along the side, through the back door, down the stage steps without finding her. The desk was empty on a Wednesday morning, badge in the center, iPad beside it, a folded letter on top of the keyboard. "Thank you for the opportunity, but I think it's time to go back to where I belong. NH." 2 lines. Benjamin read it once, then again, and stared at those 2 lines long enough for Priya to walk past the desk 3 times, pretend she wasn't looking, and give up pretending on the 4th. 3 months passed, 92 days, calls that went straight to voicemail, unanswered emails, a handwritten letter that never came back. The building went on. The meetings happened. The expansion moved forward. And every day, Benjamin walked past the empty desk and felt the silence as a physical thing, not the absence of noise, but the absence of her. Of the narration, of the pom-poms, of the world that had been different ever since she had appeared talking to herself in front of an Italian coffee machine. In the 3rd week, Priya stopped pretending she didn't notice. In the shift, Marcus said in the hallway, direct and without preamble, "Mr. Hayes, with all due respect, the building is sad." Benjamin didn't respond, but he didn't send him away, which Marcus interpreted, correctly, as agreement. It was on a Tuesday that Margaret lost her patience. She walked in without knocking, without a cappuccino, without a smile. She slammed a folder on the desk. "Benjamin Hayes, that's enough." "Mother, I'm in the middle of 92 days, she said, with no room for argument. I counted. She leaned over the desk. "She left because she loves you." Which is completely irrational and completely Nora at the same time. "She left because a journalist said she left because she thought she was hurting you." Margaret softened her voice. "There is a huge difference between the two things. And you know that." Benjamin looked at the drawer where he kept the letter. He had opened it every morning for the past 92 days. "What if she's moved on?" he said. Low. Real. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Then you come back," she said, "alone. At least you'll know you tried." She picked up her purse. "The car is out front. James already knows the destination. You called him before me." "I call him frequently, Benjamin." She opened the door. "Don't take too long. Millbrook is 3 hours away." And she left. Benjamin looked at the window for 30 seconds, opened the drawer, looked at the letter one last time, and picked up his jacket. Millbrook arrived slowly, the way small towns arrive, without announcing, without hurry, as if the world had decided to breathe differently in that particular piece of the map. The car stopped on a tree-lined street with a white fence and a garden that needed tending. Benjamin looked through the window and saw a man coming out the front door with 2 suitcases. Tall, very tall, the kind of presence that occupies space before entering it. A t-shirt, broad shoulders, dark hair, and the suitcases going into the car with the ease of someone who is leaving. Benjamin kept watching the suitcases, the car, the man, and felt something sink, slowly, heavy, the way inevitable things sink when you finally stop pretending they won't happen. She had moved on. Of course she had. 92 days. She was beautiful, genuine, the most alive person he had known in years. Why would she wait for someone who took 92 days to appear on a sidewalk in Millbrook? James opened the door. Benjamin got down into the wheelchair. He stayed still on the sidewalk. The wind made noise in the trees and the sun was at that specific late afternoon angle that illuminates everything in a slightly cruel way. The man saw Benjamin, stopped, looked at the wheelchair, at the suit, at the black car that clearly wasn't from around there, and said nothing. He just stood there with the suitcases in his hands, with the calm expression of someone who is observing and doesn't intend to interfere. Benjamin looked at him for a long moment, then turned the wheelchair toward the front door. "Excuse me," he said, passing by the man. The man stepped aside, without comment, without question. Benjamin went up the improvised ramp on the side porch. There was one, he noticed, as if someone had placed it there to make it easier, and knocked on the door. Nora opened it, hair down, old t-shirt, bare feet, and the expression of someone who hadn't expected this, her eyes opening wide, her hand holding the door handle, his name coming out before any other word found its way. Benjamin. He looked at her. Looked at her the way you look at things you've kept in memory for 92 days, and which are now in front of you, and are bigger and more real than memory was able to preserve. "You left," he said. "Yes. Without warning. I left a letter. 2 lines, Nora." She didn't respond. From inside the house, Lord Whiskers meowed, long, dramatic, with the specific inflection of an animal that had been following the situation and had a formed opinion. Neither of them looked at the cat. "I know you've moved on," Benjamin said, and his voice was different. Not the CEO, not the man in a suit, just Benjamin, without armor, on the sidewalk in Millbrook. "I saw the suitcases, the car." A pause. "I understand." Nora opened her mouth. He didn't let her. "Because for 92 days I've been looking at an empty desk and trying to remember what the silence was like before you appeared. And I can't." He took a deep breath. "I can't, because it wasn't normal, it was just silence. And I had forgotten there was a difference." She was very quiet. "You taught me to laugh again," he said. "Taught me that 4 steps matter, that imaginary pom-poms are real when someone shakes them for real. That strength is not about not needing anyone." He took a deep breath. And I was foolish enough to let you leave without saying that." Nora's hand was still on the door handle. Her eyes were bright. She said nothing. And Benjamin, who had come all the way there without knowing if there was any hope, decided it didn't matter. "I love you," he said. Simple, direct, without qualification, completely, chaotically, permanently. A pause. "And if you're happy, if you found someone who deserves you, then I'm happy for you. But I needed you to know. I needed to say it out loud at least once." He looked at her for a moment, at the bright eyes, at the hand on the door handle, at the face he had kept in memory for 92 days. And then he turned the wheelchair. Slowly, toward the gate. The wheels on the concrete sidewalk, making that specific sound of movement that doesn't want to be made but is being made anyway. He was halfway there. "He's my brother," her voice, low, almost soft. Benjamin stopped. The wheels stopped. The wind continued. The trees continued. The sun continued at that cruel late afternoon angle. He didn't turn around right away. He stayed still for 3 seconds that seemed to have their own duration. Then he slowly turned the wheelchair. Nora was on the porch, barefoot, her eyes bright in a way that was no longer just contained emotion. "Daniel," she said, and there was something at the corner of her mouth that was arriving slowly. "He's my older brother. Firefighter. Excessively muscular. Terrible timing. She came down the porch steps, and he's helping me reorganize the apartment. The suitcases are things from the guest room he's taking to his new place." Benjamin looked at Daniel. Daniel, leaning against the car with his arms crossed, looked back with the calm, economical expression of Nora's father. That expression of someone who had been watching from the beginning and had decided not to interfere because some things need to resolve themselves. "You knew," Benjamin said to him. Daniel shrugged. "Once? Enough." "Why didn't you say anything?" "You needed to say it first," Daniel replied. Simple as breathing. Nora had reached the front of the wheelchair now, bare feet on the concrete, bright eyes, the smile she was clearly trying to hold back and clearly losing the battle against. "You told me you loved me," she said, thinking I had moved on. "Yes." "Knowing you would leave after." "Yes." "And you went anyway." "Yes." She looked at him. 92 days, she said softly. I counted 2. Benjamin looked up. "I left because I love you," she said. "Because I didn't want to be the reason people don't take you seriously. Because I thought you deserved someone who talks to elevators," he said. "Who pulls out pom-poms in a physical therapy room. Who conducts a press conference without authorization." "Benjamin, because that is exactly what I want." Lord Whiskers appeared at the door, came down the steps with the dignity of an animal who had waited long enough, sniffed the wheelchair wheel with the seriousness of an inspector, and sat down beside Benjamin. Daniel looked at the cat. "He approved," he said. "He approves everyone," Nora replied. "He scratched the mail carrier for 3 weeks. The mail carrier has strange energy." Benjamin was looking at Nora. She was looking at him. "Come back with me," he said. "To Manhattan. To me. Manhattan is a detail." She was quiet for a moment, looked at Daniel. Daniel shrugged with his father's economy. "Go," he said. She looked at Lord Whiskers. The cat blinked. "Once? Okay," she said. "But Lord Whiskers comes with us, obviously. And I'm still going to talk to myself. I know, and the pom-poms come out when I decide." "Nora, yes?" "Come before I change my mind about the cat part." She laughed. That laugh, the one he had missed every second of the last 92 days. On the road back, with Lord Whiskers in the back seat vocally and continuously expressing his opinion about the situation, Nora looked out the window and murmured, "Okay, Lord Whiskers, you're inheriting the mugs anyway." For loyalty, Benjamin, beside her, did that thing with his mouth. Lord Whiskers meowed. James, in the front seat, said nothing. But there was something different in the rearview mirror. He was smiling. James's phone buzzed. "Margaret Hayes. How did it go? Did she come back?" James typed 3 words. "Yes, yes, yes." The reply came in 2 seconds. "I knew it. MH." 6 months after Millbrook, on an October afternoon when the Hudson Valley Sun had decided to cooperate for the first time in weeks, Nora Harrison was having a serious conversation with the mirror in the guest room of the Hayes property. "Okay," she said to her reflection. "Today is the day. The day, capital D. The dress is perfect, the hair is acceptable, the shoes are present. And you," she pointed at her own reflection, "are going to walk into that garden, are going to get to the altar. And you are not going to trip, you are not going to narrate any disasters out loud, and you are definitely not going to make friends with any object in the decorative setting. Her reflection didn't look convinced. I don't believe it either, she admitted. The door opened. Linda Harrison walked in the way she always walked in, like a hurricane with good intentions and volume calibrated for spaces larger than that one. My daughter, she announced, stopping in the middle of the room with her hands on her face. You look. Mom, breathe. You look beautiful. Linda exploded, her eyes already welling up. Nora Harrison, look at you, in a wedding dress, in Hudson Valley. We're from Millbrook, Nora. Millbrook, I know where we're from, Mom. And now you're going to marry an amazing man who truly loves you, and he has that wonderful mother who sends me flowers every week. And that driver who showed up at our door with a breakfast basket last Thursday. James, his name is James. James! An angel in a black suit. Linda pulled a handkerchief from her purse. Bob, come in here. Look at our daughter. Bob Harrison appeared in the doorway. A dark suit that had clearly been chosen by Linda and was slightly uncomfortable at the shoulders, but which he wore with the silent dignity of someone who doesn't complain out of love. He looked at Nora, just looked, for long enough that she felt everything he wasn't saying. Dad, she said softly. You look, he said, and stopped, cleared his throat. You look like your mother, on our wedding day. Linda burst into tears. Nora's eyes welled up. And Bob Harrison, with the economy of a man who weighs every word because he knows the weight each one carries, crossed the room, placed both hands on his daughter's shoulders, and said, It's going to work out. 3 words. The same 3 words from the Manhattan sidewalk, 3 years ago, when she was afraid of an entire city. This time she was afraid of an entire life. And it worked the same way. Thank you, Dad. He hugged her. Quick. Enough. And then he left because he had reached his permitted emotional limit. And both of them knew it. Linda continued crying for 2 more minutes before remembering she had to fix her own lipstick. The garden at the Hayes property in Hudson Valley had existed for over 100 years. It had survived generations of Hayeses, births, deaths, corporate scandals, at least one diplomatic crisis that Margaret never fully explained. And that October afternoon, it was covered in white flowers and hanging lights that caught the late afternoon sun as if they had been planned by someone who controlled their own weather. 150 guests occupied the white chairs aligned in precise rows. Priya in the second row, already with a handkerchief in hand since 3 in the afternoon. Josh adjusting his glasses for the 10th time in 10 minutes. Marcus with his phone in strategic position, because Marcus always had his phone in strategic position. Daniel seated with the family, his restless children beside him, his wife holding his hand with the patience of someone who knew exactly what kind of event she was at. And Margaret Hayes in the front row, stunning in royal blue, with the bearing of a queen watching the coronation she herself had orchestrated, which was essentially true. In the last row, alone, a woman, silver hair pinned in an elegant bun, discreet but impeccable navy blue dress, triple pearl necklace, and blue eyes that observed the entire garden like someone reading a map of familiar territory. Nobody had sat beside her, not out of discourtesy. Because of something harder to name, that specific presence of people who build silence around themselves without needing to ask. She didn't look at Margaret. Margaret didn't look at her. But both of them knew the other was there. Benjamin was at the altar, standing, not in the wheelchair. Standing, with the 2 carbon fiber canes, the posture of someone who had practiced that specific moment with David at 6 in the morning for 3 weeks, and the expression of a man who is exactly where he wants to be. David, in the row of employees, had his fists closed on his knees. Priya saw it and knew instinctively what it meant. He trained for this, she whispered to Josh. Josh didn't answer. He was cleaning his glasses for the 11th time. The music began, and Nora Harrison appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm. She was trying not to narrate. Truly trying. Okay, Nora, she whispered, completely inaudible to anyone but herself and possibly the universe. 1 step at a time. It's just an aisle, a long aisle, with 150 people watching. And cameras. And flowers. And that man at the altar who is looking at you as if you are the only thing that exists in this entire garden. Bob pressed her arm lightly. Universal signal for keep walking. She walked, and that was when she saw it. Benjamin at the altar, standing with his canes looking at her, and there was something in that look she hadn't seen before. Not at the parallel bars, not in the elevator, not in Millbrook. Peace. Benjamin Hayes was at peace. Nora felt her throat tighten. "Okay," she murmured, lower still. "Don't cry. You'll arrive there with puffy eyes and you'll look—" Bob pressed her arm again. She stopped murmuring. When she reached the altar, Bob placed his daughter's hand in Benjamin's hand with the care of someone transferring something precious. No speech, no drama, just the transfer. Benjamin looked at Bob. Bob looked at Benjamin. And in some language that needed no words, something was communicated and received. Bob returned to his place beside Linda, who was crying silently into the handkerchief, which for Linda Harrison was the equivalent of shouting in a whisper. The judge was a small man with a big voice who had clearly done this many times and still enjoyed it. "We are gathered here today," he began. "What a beautiful place," Nora murmured to Benjamin, looking around without meaning to. "Nora," he said gently. "Sorry," processing out loud. "Habit." "I know. I won't do it anymore." "It's okay if you keep doing it." The judge cleared his throat. They looked at him. "We are gathered here today," he began again, with the patience of a professional accustomed to interruptions, "to join Benjamin Hayes and Nora Harrison in matrimony." The ceremony continued. Words about love, commitment, the nature of a promise. The kind of words that have existed for centuries because people keep needing them. Then came time for the vows. Benjamin had written his. He took them from the pocket of his tuxedo, a small card, the kind nobody expected him to carry, and looked at her. "Nora Harrison," he said, and the voice was steady, but there was something different in it. Something without armor. "You came into my life talking to an Italian coffee machine that clearly needed therapy, and instead of making me feel like the world was functioning normally, you made me remember that the world can be completely absurd and completely perfect at the same time." Priya in the second row had the handkerchief pressed to her face. "You taught me that strength is not silence. That asking for help is not weakness, that 4 steps matter as much as 4,000. He paused. "You appeared with imaginary pom-poms when I was alone in a gym at 8 at night and made that seem completely normal. And I realized that was exactly the kind of normal I needed." Josh had completely given up on his glasses. Marcus was recording. "I promise," Benjamin continued, "to be the man who deserves your pom-poms, who listens to your narrations, who is present for every conversation with elevators, printers, and whatever other object needs a conversation partner." The corner of his mouth. "And I promise that when you talk to yourself, I will always be listening." Silence in the garden. The kind of silence that only happens when 150 people hold their breath at the same time. Then it was Nora's turn. She had written vows. She had practiced, she had timed them. She had made Daniel sit as an audience for 40 minutes on Tuesday to make sure they would fit within the time. She took the paper from the bouquet where she had hidden it, opened it, looked at the words she had written, looked at Benjamin, and folded the paper. "I wrote vows," she said to the entire garden. "Good vows, with metaphors and everything." Daniel approved them. He's hard to impress. Daniel, in the crowd, nodded, confirming. "But, looking at you right now," she continued, and the voice was different. That voice that appeared when the filters left, and what remained was only real. "I can't say the words I wrote. Because the words I wrote were the words I thought I should say. And you spent an entire year teaching me that what I should say and what I actually feel are 2 completely different things." Benjamin had that look, the look she collected. "So," Nora said, taking a deep breath, "I'm going to say what is true. You are the most stubborn, most closed-off, most perfectly imperfect man I have ever known. You spoke to me for the first time with the expression of an entomologist studying a new species." Laughter through the garden. "And yet," she said, and the voice trembled just a little, "you are the most courageous person I have ever seen. Because you could have stayed at that window, looking at Manhattan, safe and alone and in control. And you chose not to. And I promise that as long as you keep choosing not to stay there, I will be here, with pom-poms, with involuntary narration, with conversations for elevators and printers and whatever temperamental Italian machine crosses our path. Linda Harrison was now using her husband's handkerchief because her own had been completely compromised. Bob was looking at the garden with a suspicious intensity. "I love you," Nora said simply, chaotically, permanently, and with impeccable documentation of all the disasters we've caused together. Benjamin laughed. That laugh. The real one, the one she had learned to bring out, the one that filled the room like light. The judge, clearly moved as well, cleared his throat one last time. "The rings, please." When the judge declared them husband and wife, and the garden erupted in applause, Benjamin pulled her into a kiss that made Marcus shout something unintelligible, and Priya throw her handkerchief into the air like a victory flag. Linda Harrison hugged Bob with enough force to compromise several ribs. Bob let her. Margaret, in the front row, sat still for a moment, eyes closed, hands clasped in her lap, like someone storing that moment in a specific place in memory. Then she opened her eyes and looked at the last row. The chair was empty. The silver-haired woman had left as silently as she had arrived, without saying goodbye, without being seen leaving, simply absent, as if she had never been there, except that Margaret knew she had been, and she stored that too. On the other side of the garden, behind a bush that lined the property, a figure stood among the trees. Still, impeccable dark suit, white hair, the posture of a man who had learned to occupy space without being seen when needed. One hand holding a cane and the other a phone. The screen showed the photos he had taken from a distance. Shaky camera, golden late afternoon light, two people at the altar, the entire garden on its feet. He watched the kiss, watched the applause, watched Nora laugh with her face still buried in Benjamin's shoulder. And he didn't walk in. Not because he couldn't, because he had chosen not to. For now. He slowly lowered the phone, and the camera closed on his hands. On the hands of an old man who had watched empires be built and destroyed. On the hands that held the phone with the firmness someone who still had strength the world had forgotten existed. And on the finger, the ring, dark gold, an engraved symbol that belonged to no known family. Not a wedding band, not a common heirloom. It was something else, something older. Something that had a name in circles where names were not said out loud. He looked at the garden one last time. At the grandson who didn't know he existed, at the woman who had entered that family talking to coffee machines and changed everything, and murmured so low that only the trees heard, "Welcome to the family, Nora Hayes." He turned and disappeared among the trees as if he had never been there. On the other side of the world, in an office in Tokyo with a view of a city that never sleeps differently than Manhattan, more orderly, more precise, more controlled, a man sitting behind an empty desk looked at his phone. The notification had arrived 20 minutes ago. He hadn't opened it yet. He had just sat looking at the dark screen, his fingers still, the expression of someone who made a decision a long time ago and is living with it. Finally, he unlocked the phone, opened the notification. A photo, two people, altar, garden, late afternoon light. Richard Hayes looked at his son, at the woman beside him, at the smile he hadn't seen on his son in years. And he did nothing. He put the phone on the desk, stood looking at Tokyo outside. And for the first time in a long time, the unshakable expression of Richard Hayes showed something it never showed in board meetings or corporate confrontations. Regret. In another time zone, in an apartment that smelled of old money and even older resentment, a man read the message on his phone, read it again, and then smiled. But it wasn't the smile of someone who is happy. It was the smile of someone who has just received confirmation that the board has changed and is recalculating every piece. The Hayes heir has married a peculiar young woman. From the cafeteria. Alexander Hayes put the phone on the mahogany desk, interlaced his fingers, and said to the empty office with the voice of someone who has time and patience and uses neither without purpose. Peculiar. A pause. Interesting. In the garden of the Hayes property in Hudson Valley, while 150 people celebrated and the music started, and Linda Harrison pulled Bob onto the dance floor with the determination of a woman who had waited her entire life for that moment, Nora and Benjamin stood still for 1 second. Just 1 second. In the middle of everything. "Okay," she murmured to him, her eyes bright. "We did it. We did. You're standing." "I am." At the altar, at the altar. Without falling. Without falling. I didn't fall either. She looked at her own feet with genuine satisfaction. That is a historic victory, Benjamin. Someone should write it down. Marcus is already writing it down. On video. Live. Of course he is. They looked at each other, and in that second, before the music and the dancing and the cake and everything that came after, there were just the two of them. A man who had learned to laugh again, and a woman who had never stopped. Where to now? She asked. Benjamin smiled, that smile, hers. Forward, he said. And Nora Hayes, former barista, vice president, involuntary narrator, owner of magic pom-poms and a heart bigger than any office on the 35th floor, pulled her husband onto the dance floor. He didn't dance. He stood, canes on the ground beside him, holding her hands, and she danced for both of them, with all the clumsy and perfect grace that was completely, unmistakably hers. Because sometimes the wrong person for a world is exactly the right person for someone's life. If this story touched you, leave a rating from 0 to 10. And your like helps our channel reach more people. And if you want to know what happens next, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. In a garden in Hudson Valley, one story ended. And in 3 different places in the world, 3 others began. But that part we tell later. Nora's adventure, now Nora Hayes, had only just begun. Continues in episode 2, after the wedding.